Welcome back to Dark Sleep Radio. Tonight, I've got a story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. It all started on a late-night drive from my cousin Dylan's place in Gila Bend. I'd been helping Dylan build a swing set for his new kid, and the weekend stretched longer than planned. By the time I hit the road Sunday night, midnight had already come and gone. Highway 85 was a lonely stretch, just black asphalt cutting through desert scrub, with occasional gas stations and ranch signs barely visible in the darkness. A cooler sat in the passenger seat, filled with leftover barbecue and melting ice. My plan was simple: get home around 3 a.m., catch a few hours of sleep, and then drag myself to work. About 40 minutes into the drive, something strange happened. The radio went silent. One moment, an AM talk show was droning on about forest management. The next, complete silence. No static, just dead air. I tried adjusting the dial, but nothing worked, not even FM stations. I didn't think much of it initially. This highway was notorious for poor reception. I rolled down the window to stay alert and kept driving. Near the Palpo Verde turnoff, things got weird. First, a car appeared on the horizon, its headlights growing brighter. As it passed, the lights didn't fade or turn, they simply vanished, instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. My rearview mirror showed nothing, no tail lights, no fading engine noise. 10 minutes later, it happened again. This time, a pickup with big rigged tires approached. Same bizarre occurrence, lights on, then completely gone the moment it passed me. I slowed down, my hands getting sweaty. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe it was glare, or the headlights were angled strangely. I even convinced myself it might be a desert heat illusion. But it was well after midnight, and the air was cool. Something wasn't right. I was driving late at night when something strange happened. 3 cars passed me, but the third one caught my attention. It was an older white sedan, maybe a Camry, moving a bit fast. A blonde woman sat in the driver's seat, her gaze fixed straight ahead, hands firmly on the wheel. Her eyes didn't move and she didn't blink. Then, just like before, the headlights and car vanished, leaving nothing behind me. I pulled onto the gravel shoulder and cut the engine. Complete silence surrounded me. No music, no wind, no insects. Even the air felt motionless. I checked my phone. No signal. The time read 1 to 12 a.m. That's the last clear memory I have. I wasn't tired, and I didn't fall asleep. I remember gripping the steering wheel, staring into the dark road ahead. Then suddenly, I was pulling into my driveway at 3:26 a.m. The motion sensor floodlights I installed last winter flickered on automatically. Something felt off. The ice in the cooler had melted, and a sour barbecue smell lingered. My mouth was parched, and a pounding headache throbbed in my head, similar to the disorientation after a long flight. My ears rang incessantly. I tried to piece together what happened. Somehow I'd driven the entire route. The odometer confirmed the miles, and my gas tank was lower, yet I couldn't recall a single moment between pulling over and arriving home. A new voicemail on my phone puzzled me further. Time-stamped at 2:17 a.m., it was from my own number, which made no sense as I hadn't touched my phone and never used voice memos. Hesitantly, I pressed play. Static filled my ear, not pure white noise, but a pulsing sound like a weak radio station. After a few seconds, another sound emerged, a wet, irregular clicking, almost like someone tapping on underwater glass. Then breathing. Not my breathing, but slow and heavy, as if someone was sleeping near the microphone. The static rose and fell, punctuated by sharp feedback squeals. Around 20 seconds in, I heard my own voice, but Ted dragged down in pitch. I caught a few slurred syllables before silence returned. Then, crystal clear, my voice spoke again. I was on a solo night flight from Reno to Elko, logging mountain hours in a rented Cessna 172 for my commercial pilot certification. After landing, I got a voicemail that would haunt me. The message was simple: they're not gone, just that. I played it repeatedly, holding the phone to my ear until the screen went dark. The voice was eerily familiar, maybe mine, maybe not. Its tone was matter-of-fact, devoid of emotion, as if stating an undeniable truth. I searched the phone for any additional recordings or videos. Nothing. The call log showed only one outgoing number, my own voicemail, called during the flight. During those nights, sleep became impossible. I'd constantly check the windows, scanning for headlights or figures on the lawn, but only darkness greeted me. The next day, I inspected the car. Everything appeared normal. No damage, no burns, no scratches. But something was off. The driver's side door bore long, thin scuff marks like greasy fingers had gripped the handle. I wiped them away and kept silent about it. That week, I'd wake suddenly around 3 a.m., heart racing. Some nights, I thought I heard movement on the roof. Flashlight in hand, I'd investigate, finding nothing. No raccoons, no fallen branches, no footprints. Curious, I called my voicemail from a landline. The message played identically. Warped breathing, those same 3 words. I saved the recording to my computer and examined it in a sound editor. The waveform revealed strange, tiny gaps in the static, possibly embedded fragments or just compression artifacts. After a week, I deleted it. Something felt wrong about keeping it. Since then, everything's been quiet, but I won't drive that highway stretch anymore. Visiting Dylan now means taking a longer route, an extra hour I'm willing to spend. Whatever happened that night, whatever fragments of memory remain, I sense there are parts of the experience I'm not meant to fully remember. One thing haunts me. I'm certain I didn't make it home alone. I was flying a 2-hour route I knew well, a trip I'd done twice before. This was back in 2019, with perfect weather, clean skies, light winds, no storms anywhere. I filed IFR just to keep things structured, though visibility was excellent. After topping off tanks at Reno Stead and checking my sectional one last time, I took off around 8:40 p.m. By 8,500 feet, I had the plane trimmed, autopilot set, and was monitoring things casually while talking to NorCal Center and sipping lukewarm gas station coffee. Somewhere near Austin, in the middle of nowhere, I noticed something unusual off to my left. Initially, I thought it might be a ranch light or another plane, but something felt different. It was a steady, round white light pacing me at about my 10, roughly a quarter mile out. No navigation lights, no strobe, no transponder signal. When I checked with Center, they confirmed I was the only aircraft in that airspace. I asked about secondary radar. Nothing. The light maintained an exact distance and altitude, completely motionless. After 3 or 4 minutes, it vanished. Not a fade or a streak, just gone. I chalked it up to tired eyes or a windshield reflection. But 5 minutes later, it reappeared. This time there were 2 lights, one at 10 and another at 2. I tried dipping the wings to see if they'd shift, but they remained fixed, seeming almost tethered to my position. Something else felt off. The radio was unnaturally silent. Normally, even when not communicating, you'd hear other pilots getting handoffs. But now, complete silence. The lights continued their precise, unnerving formation, defying any rational explanation I could imagine. The silence was total. My radio crackled with static, then went dead. I switched Freak, UNC's, checked the volume. Nothing. Not even an ATIS broadcast came through. My phone showed no bars, not even in emergency call mode. Strange, since I'd had signal earlier. Something felt off. The silence pressed against me, making me hyper-aware. My hands moved sluggishly, like pushing through thick liquid. The headset felt tighter, pressure building inside the cabin. Then the lights started moving, not turning or banking, just instantly relocating. One moment at my sides, the next behind me. Pacing at the same speed, they pulsed irregularly, white to pale bluish-green and back. No discernible pattern, just like an uneven breath. I reached for the throttle instinctively, unsure of my intention. Suddenly, everything cut out. The engine kept running, but all electronics died. Headset, panel lights, radios, transponder, all went dark without warning or flicker. I should have declared an emergency, but I couldn't even squawk 7600. Flying blind, I remained calm. My brain shifted into neutral. Wings level, I continued flying, but everything felt wrong. The air seemed thicker, time slower. In that moment, a second, or maybe longer, the lights moved forward, sliding past my wing struts. No sound, no turbulence. They stopped ahead of me, one to the left, one to the right. Then abruptly, I was talking to Center again. Their voice cut in mid-sentence, like a radio catching signal after a blackout. Sierra 32 Niner, do you copy? Panel lights returned, transponder flashed, GPS tracking resumed. The lights were gone. I checked the time and immediately noticed something was off. It was 10:17 p.m., a time that would mean nothing to most, but for me on this route, it didn't make sense. My GPS showed I was 40 miles southeast of where I should have been. I was flying that corridor, a route I knew well, when something felt off. The heading was wrong, but I hadn't touched it. Center asked me to verify my position, and I told them what I was seeing. They didn't comment, just gave me vectors to get back on course. I followed their instructions without much discussion. When I landed in Elko around 10:45, I was shaking. My legs felt weak, not from adrenaline, but as if I hadn't used them in a while. I did a walk round and found no damage. However, the wingtips looked cleaner, almost wiped down. I casually mentioned this to the FBO guy, who said it had been dusty earlier from the wind. All other planes on the ramp had grit, but mine didn't. I didn't report anything officially. I logged the flight as normal, noting only the course deviation and a vague instrument error. But I knew something was strange. There's no way I could have drifted 40 miles off course during straight and level flight without realizing it. 7 minutes of radio silence couldn't explain such a significant deviation. I still fly often. I enjoy being up there, but I've changed my habits. No more night flights alone, and I avoid that particular corridor unless absolutely necessary. Sometimes, when I'm high over the desert, I catch myself glancing to the left just in case. It was early October, and I was camping alone near Lake Joe Cassie in the Blue Ridge foothills. After a day of hiking, I pitched my tent at dusk in a clearing under some pines. The air was cool with a damp, leaf-mulchy smell. The sky was clear and the moon nearly full. I'd packed light, a one-person tent, foam pad, sleeping bag, stove, water bladder, and a small dry bag with food. After making instant rice and tuna, listening to a few songs on my phone, I zipped everything up and went to sleep around 10. As always, I tucked my boots under the tent flap and my pack at the foot of my sleeping bag to keep animals away. I fell asleep to the sound of crickets and rustling leaves, the usual woods noise. Then deep in the night, I woke up. I couldn't tell the time. My eyes were open, but at 5:30 I couldn't see anything. White light surrounded me, not harsh like a flashlight, but soft and diffuse, glowing from every direction. The tent was completely filled with this light, erasing all shadows and corners. Silence enveloped me, not just the absence of outside sounds, but a total, absolute stillness. I couldn't hear anything. No wind, no insects, not even my own breathing. When I tried to speak, I felt my jaw move and throat vibrate, but no sound emerged. Moving felt strange, like struggling through water. My limbs responded sluggishly, with an unnatural delay, feeling impossibly heavy. I attempted to unzip the tent, but my hands passed through nothing but light. The space around me seemed to have transformed, leaving me disconnected and disoriented. Gradually, the white glow began to fade, dimming like a slowly extinguished lamp. Then darkness. Morning arrived. Sunlight filtered through tree branches. I awoke feeling hot and cramped, my mouth stuffed with something. Coughing, I realized my pack was pressed against my face. My sleeping bag was tangled around my legs, and my camp stove dug into my ribs. Bizarrely, all my gear was inside the tent. The bear bag, which I'd carefully hung 20 feet away before sleeping, now lay across my chest. My muddy boots were wedged under my knees. The dry bag, fuel canister, and trekking poles, everything I'd meticulously packed or placed outside, was now piled on top of me, as if someone had dumped it all inside and zipped the tent shut. I sat up slowly, my head throbbing with an intense, dull ache behind my eyes. My throat felt raw. Unzipping the tent, I found the woods restored to their normal state, birds chirping, a squirrel scampering through the trees. Outside, I immediately noticed the rope from the bear bag. It remained tied to the same branch, but the knot was undone, the line hanging limply almost to the ground. When I broke camp that morning, something caught my eye just outside the clearing. About 30 feet into the brush, a small circle in the grass stood out, maybe 5 or 6 feet across. The ground was flattened, not trampled, just pressed down like something heavy had rested there. No scorch marks, no tracks, just a perfect round patch where plants were bent outward in every direction. My boots were damp, packed with a reddish mud that didn't belong in this part of the forest. Too fine, too clay-like. I checked my phone, but it was dead. Earlier it had been at 60% battery, but now nothing. Not even the charge icon would show when I plugged in the solar pack. Everything felt off. I wasn't missing any time. The sun seemed to be in its usual early morning position, around 7 or 8, but something was different. It was like I hadn't really slept, like my body had been through something and hadn't caught up. I'd been cut clean open, not clawed, not chewed, just a straight, smooth slice. I searched for animal signs but found nothing. No fur, no droppings, not even broken branches near that quiet circle. I hiked out before noon, not stopping for lunch, not looking back. At the trailhead, my phone finally powered on. No service, but the time read 3:47 p.m., and the date was unchanged. No lost days, no unexplained entries. But then I noticed something strange in the voice recorder, an app I never use. A new file from the previous night, exactly 1 minute long. I played it. Blank. Just absolute silence. I deleted it without thinking, though now I kind of wish I hadn't. I haven't returned to that trail. I still camp, but only in groups, and I got rid of that tent. Donated it to Goodwill a few days later. Not because anything was wrong with it, but because it smelled faintly of something unfamiliar. Not dirt, not sweat, not plastic. Something colder, sterile. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe I sleepwalked. Maybe I had a weird dream and dragged my gear around without realizing. That light, that silence, the inability to hear my own breath. That wasn't a dream. We packed light for the trip into Lassen National Forest near Cinder, taking minimal gear and no real plan. Ka wanted to escape the world. No cell service, no traffic, just pure quiet. Our supplies were basic: 1 tent, 2 sleeping bags, a jet boil, trail mix, and canned soup. Kayla brought her old camera, the strap hanging by threads, capturing everything from trees to skies to my clumsy fire-starting attempts. The first night, we camped by a shallow creek about 4 miles in, completely alone. After eating, we talked about how strange it felt, not constantly checking our phones. She joked about deleting Instagram, something she'd never actually do, given how much she loved posting. Around 3 a.m., something woke me up. At first, I thought it was wind, but the tent fabric moved like something had brushed against it, while the trees remained perfectly still. When I unzipped the tent to investigate, nothing was there. No animals, no sounds except the creek's gentle flow. Kayla was zipped into her sleeping bag, facing away from me. The next morning, she asked if I'd gotten up during the night. I said kind of, and learned she thought she'd heard whispering but assumed it was a dream. I hadn't heard anything similar. Our hike continued with Kayla unusually quiet. Normally chatty about random facts and work stories, she now just walked ahead, taking pictures. Late afternoon brought unexpected clouds that quickly turned into a hard rain, soaking us before we could set up shelter. We found refuge under thick pines, creating a makeshift camp with everything damp and her camera fogged up. At some point, Kayla muttered that something felt off. When I asked what she meant, she just shook her head, suggesting we were being watched. That night, I experienced something between a dream and reality. A bright white light hovered outside the tent, unmoving and unlike any flashlight. I was completely paralyzed, unable to move, speak, or even breathe. The tent's air felt impossibly heavy, and I sensed something just behind the fabric's thin barrier. Morning broke, and I came to with a start. The tent was still zipped, but something felt off. Kayla was nowhere to be seen. I assumed she'd gone out to take photos or use the bathroom, but her camera remained in the tent. Unusual, since she never went anywhere without it. Her boots were missing, so I figured she'd taken a quick walk. Hours passed. I circled the campsite, walking about a half-mile out, calling her name. Silence. By noon, my calls had turned to desperate yells. I climbed a rock ridge, spinning in circles and scanning the forest. Nothing. No footprints, no trace in the soft dirt around our site. Panic set in around 2 p.m. I grabbed only my phone, still without signal, marked a waypoint on my GPS app, and started hiking out quickly. Dusk had fallen by the time I reached the trailhead. I drove until I found service and called 911. Search and rescue was dispatched that night. A deputy kept me at the ranger station while the first team went up. They found our campsite the next morning, my tent, our food, her sleeping bag, but no sign of Kayla. Then things got strange. They asked for photos of her. I mentioned most were on her camera, but I had a few on my phone from previous trips, including one from our first night by the creek. When I opened my gallery, the photo was gone. I checked the trash folder. Nothing. I scrolled through a year's worth of pictures. Not a single image of Kayla existed. This made no sense. I had photos from our grocery run, a blurry selfie from the gas station, now showing only me. I told the deputy it must be a glitch, maybe a phone corruption or failed cloud backup. He nodded silently. They requested her full details. I provided everything. Kayla Darnell, her spelling, birthday, workplace. They returned with news that no such person was on record in Oregon. Confused, I tried to show text messages. There were none. Her entire digital existence had vanished. I was working out of a temporary botany field lab in central Utah, about 100 miles from the nearest town. Just me and a generator, surrounded by nothing but sandstone and sagebrush. The station sat in a narrow gulch just south of the San Rafael Swell, backed up against a small bluff. It was a tiny setup meant for one person, minimal living quarters with an attached greenhouse. My work was quiet and solitary, cataloging genetically variant buckwheat strains and monitoring soil chemistry. That week, the weather had been unnaturally still. No breeze, no clouds. The air felt stale, as if the entire landscape was holding its breath. My greenhouse windows stayed wide open all day, yet not a hint of movement stirred. The first sign something was off came when the soil sensors started blinking out. I had 6 of them buried in different corners of the greenhouse. All 6. Months of conversations and now nothing. I checked my contacts. Her number wasn't saved. My call log showed no history of our interactions, despite confirming our trip just 3 days earlier. When I gave them the number and they dialed, it disconnected. Back in my apartment, I pulled up social media. Kayla had vanished. No tags, no comments, no likes. We'd been friends for almost 3 years, meeting at a film festival in Bend. She'd introduced me to half my network and posted countless hiking pictures. Now, nothing. Not even her profile. I checked mutual friends. No one seemed to know who I was talking about. I called old coworkers, the guy she dated last winter. They didn't remember her. At our usual coffee spot, the barista couldn't recall Kayla, the dark blonde woman with the denim jacket covered in patches. The art supply store where she used to work weekends? Same story. Yet when I got home, the tent was still packed with 2 sleeping bags. Hers was blue, with a tag inside reading K. Darnell in Sharpie. The weirdest part? I still remember specific things she said, like how she once called ferns forest squid, a phrase that still comes to mind whenever I see them. It's like she's there in my head, but the world decided she never existed. I had custom-rigged a sensor array with an Arduino I put together myself. It tracked temperature, moisture, and pH, sending data to my laptop over Wi-Fi every 10 minutes. Everything worked perfectly until that Tuesday morning. When I checked my charts, I noticed a strange 5-hour gap from midnight to just before 5. The entire system had flatlined, then resumed as if nothing happened. I ruled out power issues since the laptop stayed online and the generator kept running. That afternoon, while investigating the greenhouse, I discovered a shorted LED grow light. Its plastic casing was warped, looking half melted as if someone had taken a blowtorch to its edge. The light wasn't hanging straight anymore, with wires pulled loose on one side. I replaced it, attributing the damage to a potential wiring problem. The next night around 2 a.m., the sensor alarm chirped 3 short beeps, signaling a critical pH drop below 4.0. This was unprecedented for that soil. Grabbing a flashlight and pulling on my boots, I headed to the greenhouse. Something felt off immediately. The air carried a distinct smell of burned dust, reminiscent of lightning striking near rock. Upon opening the door, a wave of unexpected humidity hit me. I hadn't watered recently, and it hadn't rained in days, yet the glass was completely fogged. What I saw next stopped me in my tracks. Every single plant had turned, facing inward toward the greenhouse's center. I was certain they hadn't been like this when I'd done my evening check, examining roots and misting phi RNS. The pots hadn't been dragged or toppled, but gently swiveled in place. At the center of this strange arrangement was a bare, meter-wide patch of soil I'd reserved for new specimens. The ground wasn't dug up, but smoothly pressed down in an even circle, as if something had been resting there. No prints or marks were visible, but above this spot, the glass ceiling bore a faint, scorched black outline that spread outward like a smoky fan. The greenhouse door was locked, but something felt off. A black mark marred the glass, spreading outward in a ring about a foot across. The glass itself wasn't cracked, just faintly spiderwebbed at the center. Around the mark, the metal framing had a subtle shimmer, like heat had microscopically warped its surface. I kept my distance and backed out, securing the door behind me. The next morning, I checked the time-lapse camera I'd set up for tracking plant growth. Each day, it compiled a composite from stills taken every half minute. When I opened the previous night's folder and played the video, everything seemed normal until 12:47 a.m. Then the footage went haywire. Static flickered across one frame, followed by total blackness, then a blank white screen. The timestamp suddenly jumped forward 4 hours. Digging into the raw images, I found every file between 12:47 and 4:51 was corrupted, nothing but digital noise. I pulled the memory card and ran a recovery program. It located 437 images marked as missing or partial. Scrolling through the thumbnails revealed mostly garbage data fragments. A few showed brief, vibrant flashes, violet, pale green, as if something had burst with light. One thumbnail caught a blurry curve of something smooth and metallic in the top right corner, but no clear details emerged. After deleting the corrupted files, I switched off the camera, not turning it on again. That day, the plants began behaving strangely. Gallium leaves curled inward, seemingly trying to close around something invisible. Wild barley stems bent at sharp 90-degree angles toward a central bare spot, maintaining their position even after I rotated the pots. When I moved a fern to the bench's edge, I found it tipped over and facing the center by morning. On Thursday night, I decided to keep watch. I sat in the greenhouse, flashlight resting in my lap, unsure what I might witness. Around 1:30, the temperature plummeted rapidly. My thermometer recorded a drop from 77 degrees to 61 degrees in less than 5 minutes. The greenhouse air felt electrically charged. My arm hair stood on end. LED lights flickered and then shut off completely. Silence followed. Total, absolute silence. No generator hum, no wind, not even distant insect sounds, just stillness. How long it lasted, I couldn't say. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe 10. I had been working in a remote greenhouse when things started getting strange. My last day there, I found all 6 soil sensors burnt out. Their plastic casings bubbled and wires melted into the dirt. Oddly, my laptop was untouched, and nothing else in the greenhouse showed any damage. I radioed in, citing a hardware malfunction as my reason for cutting the trip short. They didn't press me for details. Before leaving, I scooped a small soil sample from the center patch and sealed it in a jar. Now it sits on a shelf in my apartment. Over the next few days, the soil's color shifted from dark red to gray. A faint ring circles the inside of the glass where the soil doesn't stick, almost like something pushed outward from the center. Sometimes, walking past the jar, I catch a fleeting whiff of burned dust. It all began when a sheriff's deputy found me walking barefoot and naked through a soybean field outside Carthage, Illinois, around 3 in the morning. I had no wallet, no phone, nothing. A persistent, weird buzzing filled my head. My last clear memory was sitting on my couch watching a base-big all-game between the Cubs and Reds on a Tuesday night. Then suddenly, I blinked and found myself 30 miles from home, legs soaked with freezing dew. The deputy asked if I'd been drinking or using drugs. I said no. Despite shivering, I wasn't visibly injured. He wrapped me in a blanket and called an ambulance. I gave him my name, Eli Callahan, and my address. When they ran me through the system, something triggered a response. The medical staff exchanged strange looks. The medic questioned me about head trauma, falls, or car accidents. I denied everything. I felt mostly okay, just disoriented, like waking up too abruptly after an extremely long sleep. At the hospital, they conducted a full battery of tests, blood work, urine analysis, and a CT scan. All results came back clean. No stroke, no drugs, no significant physical injuries beyond some shin scratches. I kept asking what was happening, but they offered no clear answers. A detective arrived, tall with a crew cut, probably in his early 50s. He sat quietly in the corner of the ER, watching me intently before speaking. First, he asked for my social security number, which I provided. Then he inquired whether I'd ever changed my name. I answered no. From his bag, he pulled out a portable fingerprint scanner like those used by law enforcement and took my prints. Though he didn't reveal the results immediately, his entire demeanor shifted afterward, becoming more rigid and tense. He excused himself and stepped outside. Within 10 minutes, 2 more officers appeared, standing just beyond the curtain. My unease began to grow. Eventually, someone from the state, possibly a federal agent, asked me to follow them to a secure hospital office. They were polite but clear that I wasn't free to leave. In a windowless room, the man opened a folder containing documents that seemed definitively mine. Birth certificate, driver's license photo, even high school yearbook pictures. Everything matched perfectly. Address, parents, birth date. Then he delivered a startling statement. Your DNA confirms your identity, but your fingerprints do not. I thought he was joking and laughed, but his serious expression told me otherwise. He showed me 2 fingerprint sheets, one from my recent DMV license renewal, the other from the scanner they'd just used. Side by side, they looked similar, but weren't identical. Close loops and arches, yet different in minute details. Ridge breaks, bifurcations, and deltas that couldn't be easily faked. Something else was changing too. Catching my reflection, I noticed my eyes were now gray, not bluish or hazel, but a pale, almost silver frost. I'd always had brown eyes, just like my mother always said, matching her brother's. Blinking hard, I leaned closer, disbelieving. The next morning, when they brought my mother in, she studied me silently. No tears, no embrace, just pure confusion. "It's me, Mom," I said. Her first words weren't a greeting, but an observation. "It sounds like you, but your eyes were brown. Why are they gray now?" They tested everything they could think of. Scans focused on my hands and eyes, chemical exposure, pigment disorders. Nothing came back unusual, just not consistent with who I used to be. The doctors kept me for observation over the next few days, talking in hushed voices. Everyone seemed polite but distant, as if handling something fragile. Inside, I felt unchanged. My memories were intact. I remembered my childhood, passwords, and even my landlord's name. I could recite the combination to my gym locker lock. Yet small things started to unsettle me. A 5th grade teacher's name slipped away, despite having told stories about her before. Song lyrics I once knew by heart now escaped me. My handwriting looked different. Same basic style, but messier, like an imperfect forgery of my own signature. Unexplained scars appeared, including a round, flat mark on my shoulder blade about the size of a nickel. It looked old, healed years ago, but I'd never had surgery there or even a mole removed. Dreams began to haunt me. Not nightmares exactly, but recurring images. A roomless space that felt enormous. Soft, sourceless glowing light. A sensation of drifting, like floating underwater. Rhythmic clicking sounds layered like bones tapping against glass. Sometimes I'd wake with a light nosebleed, just enough to stain the pillow. After 5 days, they released me. I signed forms I barely understood, privacy waivers and something about non-standard biometric variants. My mom drove me home in silence. Stepping into my apartment, everything looked the same. Mail piled up, crusty dishes in the sink, but it didn't feel like my space. I wandered from room to room, like a stranger in someone else's home. I tried watching baseball, hoping to reconnect with something familiar. I knew the rules, but the game's rhythm eluded me. I'd zone out during pitches, blink, and realize entire innings had passed. At work, colleagues noticed I seemed different. Shannon said my voice sounded slightly higher, like I had a cold. Others mentioned I looked thinner, though my weight remained unchanged. Sometimes, people didn't recognize me at all. I ran into Kyle Brewer at a gas station, a guy from my old high school. When I said hi, he stared blankly and claimed not to know me. I reminded him about Mr. Rastan's physics class, our shared detention, but he just shook his head. Even after showing him a high school photo of us together, he only acknowledged it might look like me. Something was wrong. He couldn't remember anything, and he kept talking about missing hours and things that no longer made sense. He mentioned waking up with a buzzing in his head and recurring dreams, always that same sound. Click, 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 and this feeling of being pulled upward, weightless, into something incomprehensible. His mom rarely calls now. She says he sounds like her son, but can't meet his eyes during conversations. I think it might be because of his eye color, or maybe she sees something deeper, something that suggests something left and something else returned. We were 6 days into a 9-day mission off Vanuatu's southeast Banks Islands coast. Just a standard acoustic survey, nothing extraordinary. My job was running hydrophone drops over an unmapped trench from a previous expedition. The trench was deep, around 6,500 meters, and had never been properly profiled. Our vessel, the Alcyon, was a small retrofitted research ship. Barely 50 meters long, it housed a 6-person crew with just enough space for bunks, a cramped galley, and one workstation with sonar and data feeds. The rest was deck space for deploying equipment. We were exhausted. The heat was relentless since leaving Port Vila. Humid, windless days and warm nighttime rain. Everything felt perpetually damp. That morning, I deployed the hydrophone just after 700 at a spot about 3 miles off the shelf where the seafloor dropped rapidly. No seismic activity was reported in the area, no known vents or faults, just pure, empty depth. After a 20-minute descent, I powered up the monitor. Typically, we'd hear background noise, marine life communications, occasional whale clicks, distant ship engines. But this time, something different emerged. A low-frequency hum, around 18 hertz, well below human hearing range. The display captured it perfectly. Uniform, unmodulated, and unnervingly steady. We first noticed something strange with the sound. It wasn't like a pulse or marine engine noise. This was different. Too clean, too perfect. We logged the signal and let the hydrophone sit for 6 hours. The hum remained constant, without any Doppler drift or distortion. It didn't respond to anything. Not line tension shifts, not movement. Tracking its origin became increasingly bizarre. We triangulated the location multiple times, and each attempt revealed the signal subtly repositioning itself by meters every hour. It always stayed just out of direct alignment, making precise location impossible. By nightfall, the hum continued uninterrupted. When I reeled up the hydrophone and ran a final sweep, the signal disappeared abruptly at 3,000 meters, as if hitting an invisible barrier. We marked the anomaly and stored the equipment. Dinner was silent. An unspoken tension hung in the air. Ali tried cracking a joke about giant underwater refrigerators, but no one laughed. Around 22:30, we shut down most systems, keeping only the generator running for refrigeration and navigation lights. The sea was flat and windless, warm enough that I left the hatch slightly open. Unexpectedly, we drifted 5 nautical miles without any engines or active propulsion. Our instruments showed no external forces causing this movement. No wind, no current shifts, nothing. Only Kat was awake that morning. A marine biologist from Wellington in her early 30s, she was typically the first one up, brewing coffee. But this time we found her on the aft deck, curled against the port railing. Barefoot, eyes wide open and unblinking, she seemed completely disconnected. Her pupils were fully dilated. No response came when I waved or snapped my fingers, but her pulse remained normal and her breathing steady. We moved her to the infirmary cot. An hour later, she blinked and took a deep breath, as if emerging from deep water. Initially calm, she seemed more exhausted than frightened. Staring at the ceiling, she was silent before finally speaking. Strangely, she had no memory of being outside and spoke only of a dream, never acknowledging her unexplained time on the deck. She kept saying something wasn't wet. Her words described a bizarre space where everything looked like liquid but didn't behave like liquid. No drag, no sound, just shimmering surfaces and dark shapes moving behind them. She mentioned no lights existed, yet everything glowed. There were no walls, but she couldn't move. Something was watching, but not from the outside. When we asked her to explain, she just shook her head and started crying. We ran a full physical. No signs of stroke, no concussion. We contacted the Maritime Health Line and reported her vitals. They advised monitoring her for seizures. Around noon, something strange happened. She vomited seawater. We hadn't been in the water. Nobody had. She hadn't even been topside long enough to ingest spray, and no salt was on her skin. But the substance she threw up was unmistakably briny, thick, almost gelatinous. It reeked of decay, like something scooped from deep underwater. We bottled and froze a sample, then dumped the rest. I checked the navigation logs again. Between midnight and 4 a.m., we moved 5.3 nautical miles northwest. No engine activity, no anchor drift, no changes in water current data. Our GPS track looked manually erased and redrawn. It wasn't smooth like normal drift, but segmented and artificial. The timestamps didn't align. At row 317, a 30-minute blank appeared in the log. The system seemed to keep running but stopped recording. Later that day, I reviewed the deck cameras. At 3:02 a.m., the bow camera went white. Not blinding, just a featureless white screen. The lens wasn't obscured, no glare, no directional light. This lasted 6 minutes before the feed cut. When it resumed, Kat was already on deck, lying on her side. No footage showed her walking out or doors opening. Port and starboard cameras displayed the same whiteout simultaneously. Then darkness, then back to normal. All systems rebooted. That night, nobody slept. I watched the horizon, dead calm, not a sound. The morning's recorded hum was gone. I dropped the hydrophone, but the water remained quiet. The next morning, Kat seemed better, pale, but alert. She didn't remember much. She'd had a dream about sinking, but in reverse, like being pulled upward through pressure. Something wasn't right. The bunk seemed normal, but she asked why it was wet. We hadn't mentioned the seawater to her. I checked her mattress. The sheets were perfectly dry, yet her pillow carried a faint brine smell. We cut the expedition short, ending a day early. When we docked, tension ran high. Even Ollie had stopped cracking jokes. Everything got documented. University logs, recordings handed over, incident reports completed. Kat's blood work came back clean. No signs of hypoxia, infection, or neurological issues. Doctors suggested a dissociative episode, but that explanation didn't cover the 5 mid drift, seawater, or whiteout on the cameras. I still have the hum recording. Audio engineers, biologists, even an offshore oil rig expert have listened. Nobody can identify its origin. It's not tectonic, not mammalian, not mechanical. The frequency analysis reveals something bizarre, a spectrogram with a repeating notch like a signature. Every 47 seconds, something removes part of the signal perfectly. It's not a sound, it's a gap. The Nevada highway stretched before me, west of Tonopah, but not yet at the California line. Early August, just after 10 p.m., the car interior remained hot despite low AC. I'd left my cousin Ellie that afternoon, planning to break the journey with a cheap motel off 95. Just needed a bed and shower. Music played softly, windows slightly open, empty highway, desert and scrub on both sides. Then things got strange. First, the construction cones. Around 10:20, I approached an off-ramp and decided to stop for gas, stretch my legs. Orange cones blocked the exit. A portable arrow sign blinked left, with no detour, no construction equipment, just sand and empty road. I thought little of it. Maybe the ramp was closed. 10 minutes later, the same scenario repeated at the next off-ramp. Identical cones, identical arrow. The desert stretched out endlessly, a black void of emptiness. I was driving alone with no signs of life around me. The road seemed endless, blocked exits passing by without explanation. No other vehicles, no lights, just complete isolation. I pulled into the emergency lane and stepped out. The silence was eerie. No insects, no wind, just the cooling tick of my engine. Something felt off. My phone showed no signal, which wasn't unusual for this area, but the GPS was stuck, a blue dot frozen on a gray screen. As hours passed, strange details emerged. Mile marker 143 appeared twice with the same faded graffiti saying, "Send help." I was certain I hadn't turned around. The road remained dead straight, defying logic. Midnight brought a crystal clear sky, the Milky Way brilliantly visible. I leaned against the car, trying to rationalize the situation. Construction zones, GPS glitches, there had to be a reasonable explanation. I snapped a photo of the stars, a small attempt to document this bizarre journey. Then I noticed the overpasses. Concrete structures spanning the road every few miles, with railings but nothing beneath them, incomplete bridges leading nowhere. On the third or fourth overpass, something caught my eye. A tall, slender figure standing motionless in the center, at least 6 feet high. Just for a moment I saw it, perfectly still, watching. I drove through the night, my nerves on edge. At each overpass, a figure stood motionless, always in the exact center, perfectly upright. My headlights barely reached them, but their silhouettes were unmistakable. No features, no clothing, just smooth, shadowy shapes like vertical human outlines. With each pass, the scene repeated. Dark figures, never moving, never reacting. No light reflected off them. After about 5 miles, I pulled on to the shoulder, my heart racing. I rolled down the window. Silence. Not even a whisper of wind. Almost unconsciously, I grabbed my phone and opened the star photo I'd taken earlier. Zooming in, something caught my eye. 4 figures stood atop an overpass I hadn't noticed before. Perfectly spaced, unnaturally symmetrical. One was slightly taller than the rest. The encounter escalated. More overpasses appeared, more figures emerged, 2, then 4, then 7, as if multiplying. Once, passing beneath one, I heard a fleeting metallic vibration thrumming through the car's frame. Was it real or imagined? I pressed the accelerator. Time became strange. My dashboard clock jumped from 12:46 to 2:08 in seconds. I stopped trying to understand. At 2:43 a.m., my phone finally buzzed with signal. A weathered sign for Lundy Market and gas appeared, leading to a seemingly abandoned station with lights inexplicably burning. I sat in the lot, engine running, watching. No one approached. The morning trail I run cuts through a mix of fields and pine near Liberty Ridge, about 20 minutes outside Spokane. Old logging roads, mostly dirt and gravel, not maintained but open to the public. It's quiet out there. No cars, no houses, just trees, fence lines, the occasional deer. I've been running this loop since high school and never seen another person on it. Last October, about a week before Halloween, it was cold, mid-30s, and still dark when I parked by the gate. I started the loop clockwise like always. My headlamp was dim and the sunrise hadn't hit yet, so everything looked bluish and flat. About 3 miles in, I came up on this shiny metal post that caught the light weird. At first, I thought it was one of those emergency land survey markers, bright silver aluminum with a number. But when I got closer, I saw it wasn't a number at all. It was a long vertical plaque about 4 feet tall, maybe 6 inches wide, made of some kind of brushed steel. It looked too clean, like it had just been placed. Symbols were etched into it. Not letters, not any alphabet I knew. Sharp angular lines in repeating rows, almost like circuitry or those stencils people use for model kits. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't graffiti. It didn't look hand-done. It was laser straight and perfect. Too precise to be random. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds trying to make sense of it, then kept running. I figured maybe some kind of art thing or weird conservation marker. It didn't slow me down much. Later, when I checked the dashcam footage, all the overpass clips were blank. Like those parts had been cut out. Just clean transitions. Road, road, skip, more road. And the photo I took with the stars? Gone. Just a black square in my gallery where it used to be. That night, I drove to a store with no cars in the lot. The store lights were buzzing inside, flickering a little. I stepped out, legs shaky, and walked to the door. Locked. I knocked once, waited. A figure moved behind the counter. Not fast, not startled, just a slow turn. I couldn't see their face. The glass had a glare, but the shape was wrong. Shoulders too narrow, head too long. I backed away, got in the car, turned around, got back on the highway, and didn't stop until I hit Bishop, California, just before sunrise. The cones were gone after that. So were the overpasses. Running had become routine. The next morning, I returned to the same trail, curious about the previous day's strange GPS reading. Everything seemed normal at first, but something felt different when I reached the spot where I remembered seeing a marker. I'd tracked my run on Strava and noticed an odd flat line in the GPS data. 47 minutes stopped at mile 3.2, which made no sense. I'd been out running for about an hour, never stopping for more than a few seconds. Initially, I assumed it was just an app glitch from the spotty cell serve, ICE. When I got to the exact location, nothing was there. I searched for 10 minutes, walking up and down the trail where I was certain the marker had been. No post, no base, not even disturbed ground. I double-checked the GPS coordinates. They matched perfectly. The surroundings felt wrong. The trees seemed differently spaced, the familiar trail suddenly unfamiliar. I knew every route and turn from my daily runs, but this 100-foot stretch felt like it had been subtly rearranged. The canopy seemed denser, with a strange metallic smell in the air and an unusual silence from the birds. I mentioned this to my neighbor Len, a retired Forest Service worker who now spends his time gardening and fixing trucks. When I asked about new markers near Liberty Ridge, he dismissed my concerns. The trail hadn't been touched in 20 years, he said. I was probably just tired. That night, a headache began behind my eyes and spread down my neck. Water and Advil did nothing to help. The pain throbbed for hours until I finally fell asleep on the couch. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to a low humming sound, almost like distant power lines, but with a pulsing, breathing-like rhythm. It stopped after a few seconds. My dog Scout sat motionless, ears back, tail low, staring intently at the front door. I flipped on the lights and caught sight of my running shoes by the door. They were coated in red clay, exactly like the kind found near Liberty Ridge. The soles looked soaked, as if I'd just waded through a creek, except I knew I hadn't gone running that night. Hadn't even left the house. My keys hung on their hook, the door locked from the inside. I checked the back door too. Everything was secure, nothing broken. The next morning felt strange. My mouth tasted metallic, and my arms ached like I'd been hauling something heavy. When I checked my running app, a new route had logged at 1:39 a.m., a perfect loop out by the ridge. But something was off. The elevation data showed flat zeros across the board, and the speed was impossible, 6.4 miles in just 9 minutes. I deleted the app immediately. Running became something I avoided. Nights were restless, interrupted by what I thought was a distant humming. Scout would bark at nothing, sometimes even growling at my own reflection in the living room window. I started keeping the blinds closed. One weekend, I forced myself back to Liberty Ridge in daylight, bringing a shovel. I wanted to dig where the route marker had been. The ground was hard-packed gravel, dry on top. About 6 inches down, something metal clinked. I cleared away dirt to reveal a perfectly smooth metal sheet, around 18 by 18 inches, flush with the soil. It wasn't steel or aluminum. It didn't rust or scratch. When I tapped it with the shovel, it rang like a bell. No bolts, no edges, no writing. Just a cold, smooth surface that wouldn't move. I tried prying it up. Nothing. I even attached a rope with a tent stake and tried lifting it with my truck. The rope snapped clean in half. That night, the headache returned, throbbing behind my eyes. Scout refused to come inside, standing in the yard and staring at the trees. The final straw came last November. While raking leaves, my phone buzzed with a weather alert. The screen opened by itself, the map app zooming in on Liberty Ridge. A red pin marked a location I never placed. The same day, an unknown number left a voicemail. Just static, but beneath the noise, I could swear I heard something. I grew up in a small town in northern Minnesota, not far from the Canadian border. Lots of pine trees, long winters, not much else. Our backyard stretched into maybe 2 acres of dense woods, quiet even in the summer. Just wind, birds, the occasional snap of branches. I was 7 years old that day, playing with a little plastic dump truck near the tree line. The sun was low, casting that soft golden light of Earl. Evening, probably around 5 or 6. That's when I heard it, a weird clicking sound. Not like an animal, but more rhythmic, like metal tapping against itself. When I turned toward the woods, I saw something that wasn't human. It was a white shape hovering about 15 feet off the ground, too tall and narrow to be anything normal. No details, just an elongated teardrop standing perfectly still a couple feet above the forest floor. It wasn't glowing exactly, but bright like looking at a light bulb through fogged glass. I ran inside to my mom, who was cooking and barely paying attention. "There's something in the trees," I kept saying, but she dismissed it as probably a bird or the neighbor's dog. I tried dragging her to the back door, but she shook me off and told me to wash up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that white shape floating silently. I ended up turning on my desk lamp and sleeping with covers pulled over my head. For weeks, I avoided the woods completely. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it. Life moved on. I grew up, moved around, from Duluth to Fargo, then down to the cities. My parents stayed in that same house. After Dad passed, Mom kept it up until a fall last year forced her into assisted living. When I came up to help clean out the place and get it ready to sell, the house felt smaller than I remembered. I haven't been back since. Just that steady, slow breathing. Too regular to be natural. Like it was mechanical. Mid-October brought a cold, damp day with rain that swirled like smoke. My old room remained unchanged. The same twin bed, blue carpet, and a few action figures still sitting on the shelves. I spent most of the first day packing books and clearing out the attic. The hallways peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of dust and lemon cleaner surrounded me. That first night, I lay listening to the house's creaks and settling sounds. Around 2 a.m., the backyard motion light suddenly flicked on. Peering out the window, I saw nothing moving. Just mist rolling through the trees, illuminated by the light. Then something caught my eye deeper in the woods. A tall, pale shape stood motionless between the trees. At first, I thought it might be a fog patch catching light at an odd angle, but it remained perfectly still. I leaned closer, squinting. The shape was in the exact spot I'd seen something as a child. Sleep became impossible. I sat with the light on, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe a stump or a strange reflection. But when morning came and I looked again, nothing was there. No evidence, no trace. That day I drove into town for more boxes, taking a long route past the high school and old gas station to kill time. I dreaded returning to the house. The evening brought heightened anxiety. I kept every light on, closed the blinds, and locked the doors. Around midnight, the motion light triggered again. This time, I stood frozen in the bathroom, toothbrush in hand, heart racing. The light stayed on far longer than normal, almost 2 full minutes before clicking off. When I finally looked, the yard was empty once more. The next day, I ventured to the wood's edge. It was colder but clear, with no mist. I stepped carefully between the trees, walking on the soft pine needle floor. Silence surrounded me as I approached the spot where I'd seen the shape. I was out in the yard, digging stubborn roots along the fence line when I first heard my name. David, plain and calm, like someone had just walked up behind me. I turned, expecting to see my neighbor Jess from 2 houses down, but nobody was there. Just wind rustling through trees and the clatter of my dropped shovel. I stood listening. Nothing. Must have imagined it. This was early June, humid but not too hot. We just had a few days of heavy rain, so everything smelled of wet grass and mud. I'd been putting off yard work for weeks and finally had a free Saturday. My phone was inside charging, so no music or distractions, just me, the shovel, and occasional birds overhead. 20 minutes later, I heard it again. David. Later that day, about 15 feet from the house, something felt off. The air seemed charged like the moments before a thunderstorm. Little hairs on my arms stood up. No prints or marks marred the ground, but nearby trees bore faint balls, thin black scorch lines, perfectly horizontal, shoulder height. Not like lightning. Too uniform. That night I slept on the couch with the TV murmuring softly. At 3:11 a.m. the screen went black for an instant before returning. No sound. I sat up. Complete silence enveloped the house. No wind, no refrigerator hum, nothing. Then the back door creaked. I thought maybe I hadn't locked it. Moving toward the kitchen, I found the door shut. The motion light outside glowed. Through the thin curtain, I saw that shape again. Bright, featureless, just beyond the porch. I froze. Didn't breathe. It hovered, completely still. No sound, no movement. Just light. Not shining, but light itself. It seemed to erase shadows rather than cast them. My legs went numb as I stood transfixed. Eventually, the light clicked off. I pulled back the curtain. The yard was empty. The next morning, I packed everything and drove back to the cities. I told myself I'd return later to finish the work or hire someone local. I haven't gone back. The house remains unsold. The real estate agent says it's been hard to show. People say it feels off. I don't tell them why. I'd been hearing a voice calling my name, and it was getting weird. My house sits next to a small wooded area, not quite a forest, but dense enough that you can't see through when the leaves are thick. The first time, I heard my name clearly, like someone was standing right behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. I went to the edge of the woods and looked around. Everything was completely still. No birds, no wind, just this eerie silence that felt like the whole world was holding its breath. I even called out hello, like some kind of fool, but nothing happened. I went back to work, but I kept looking over my shoulder. That night, I told Katie about it. She laughed and suggested maybe I was just dehydrated. I'd skipped lunch, so I didn't argue. But the next day, while trimming near the shed, I heard it again. Same voice, same distance. David, calm and clear. I spun around so fast I almost dropped my hedge clippers. This time was different. Benny, our black lab, was sitting on the deck. When I turned, he stood up and stared in the same direction I was looking, toward the woods. He wasn't barking or growling, just completely alert. I walked to the tree line and scanned the area, waiting, but I didn't hear anything more. That evening, I dug out my old digital voice recorder from college. I put in fresh batteries, clipped it to a deck post, and let it run all afternoon while I worked. Katie thought I was being ridiculous, joking about ghost hunting. I just wanted to see if a neighbor was playing some kind of prank. Later that night, I plugged the recorder into my laptop and started listening. At first, it was just typical background noise, wind, birds, passing cars. But around the 38-minute mark, something changed. I heard myself grunt while pulling weeds, then a few seconds of silence. Then, clear as day, David. The voice was quieter than I remembered, but definitely there. Not a whisper, not scary, just calm, like someone trying to get my attention. My arm hair stood on end. And then, 10 seconds after the first voice, I heard something else. A second voice, higher pitched and faint, like it was far away. I'd been hearing something strange on my voice recorder. A faint voice from somewhere else, almost whispered, "We're still trying to bring you back." I replayed that segment over and over. Katie thought I was playing some kind of joke, accusing me of manipulating the audio. But I'd never touched audio editing software in my life. She dismissed it as radio interference, but I knew it wasn't that simple. The second voice seemed accidental, like it wasn't meant to be heard. It lingered in my mind for days. One Thursday, while mowing the lawn, I saw something in the woods. Not a person or even a clear shape, just a vertical shimmer, like heat rising but completely still, about 20 feet into the trees. I stopped the mower and stared. Then Benny started barking wildly. When I turned to quiet him and looked back, the shimmer had vanished. The next morning, Katie found me sleepwalking in the backyard. I'd left the back door open, standing barefoot on the grass and staring into the trees. She said I was mumbling something unintelligible. I had no memory of this. After that, I moved the recorder inside and started sleeping with it running on my nightstand. Around 3:40 a.m. on the second night, the audio got slightly staticky. Then came a burst of electronic beeping, followed by a single, unknown voice. The sleepwalking stopped, but something else began. I started experiencing intense, disorienting episodes that felt more like experiences than dreams. I'd wake up feeling like I'd been somewhere else entirely. One morning, I found a light dusting of dirt on my feet, though the floor was clean. I started keeping shoes by the bed and locking everything. It didn't matter. Twice I woke up with new scratches on my arms, thin and parallel, like from brambles. But I hadn't been in the woods. Katie noticed nothing. I was becoming increasingly unsettled. The phone rang around 2 in the morning, a harsh static noise cutting through the silence. I'm Mike, living alone in a small rental on the edge of Bend, Oregon. Nothing fancy, but quiet enough. Working day shifts at a hardware store means nights are usually for sleeping or catching up on TV. These calls started a week ago, always around the same time. I'd wake up, stumble to the phone, and hear nothing but static. Most nights I'd hang up quickly because it freaked me out. But I didn't block the number. It was always the same untraceable line with no caller ID. At first I thought it was a prank or a phone company glitch. Then something changed. On the third night, just as I was about to hang up, I heard a faint voice buried in the noise. It was like whispering underwater. I held the phone closer, heart racing. "Help me," the voice said. I froze, thinking I'd imagined it. I called my friend Jason the next day to tell him. He laughed, suggesting I was half asleep or hearing things. But I knew what I'd heard. The next night, the call came again. Same static, same time. This time the voice was clearer, almost urgent. "Help me," it said, followed by a string of numbers, 47-92-1. My work had been wearing me down. My colleague told me to take a few days off, maybe go fishing. I almost did. I packed a bag one Friday, drove halfway to the lake, then turned back. I didn't want to be far from home. That weekend I set the recorder outside for a few hours. When I listened back, I heard something new. Not a voice, but a sound. A low, steady hum, like a transformer buzzing in the distance. Then, clear as anything, we weren't finished. I don't remember recording that. It was just a regular Saturday. Katie asked me to stop with the recorder, saying it was making me paranoid. I agreed, put it in a drawer, and left it there. But sometimes, even now, I still hear it. Usually when I'm alone, out in the yard, or lying awake in bed. Not every night, but often enough. Always the same calm, familiar voice. Every night the calls would come, always with a strange sequence of numbers and a haunting plea, "Help me." I began documenting everything, writing down each detail meticulously. The voice was barely a whisper, yet it consumed my thoughts. At first, nothing seemed out of place. I checked my apartment thoroughly. Windows, doors, everything looked normal. No signs of intrusion, no weird equipment. Even my phone line tested perfectly fine. But the calls continued, persistent and unsettling. One morning, I decided to record the call. When I played back the recording, something caught my attention. A low humming tone beneath the static that hadn't been there before. I showed it to Jason, a coworker who knows about amateur radio. He suggested it might be a coded distress signal, but couldn't confirm exactly what. The nights grew more intense. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, phone in hand, heart racing. An oppressive silence filled the room, making the air feel thick and heavy. I felt constantly watched. Around 2:15 one night, the call changed. The voice sounded distorted, almost matching my own. "Mike, help me." Startled, I dropped the phone. The static swirled louder, like an approaching storm. I called Jason, explaining everything. "Maybe you should see a doctor," he suggested. "Could be stress." But I knew this was different. A few nights later, I waited, determined to understand. When the phone rang, I answered immediately. Static filled my ear, but beneath it, a voice spoke too quickly to comprehend. Then came the numbers. 47921 38647. I frantically wrote them down, trying different combinations in Google. Nothing made sense. That's when the strangeness began spreading beyond the phone calls, seeping into the edges of my reality. Night after night, strange things kept happening. Lights flickered, and through my window, I'd catch glimpses of odd glows low over the trees, not like fireworks or planes, but something different. One evening, a constant low buzzing sound drifted from outside, but when I looked, nothing was there. Mrs. Hargrove caught me getting mail the next day. "You look tired, Mike. Everything okay?" Her eyes held a knowing look. When I mentioned weird phone calls, she nodded slowly. I had something similar years ago, always at night. No one believed me either. Her gaze seemed distant, and I thanked her before heading inside. An unsettling feeling grew. Something was in the room, just beyond my perception. I checked locks repeatedly, kept my phone close, feeling exhausted and on edge. Around 2 a.m. one night, the phone rang again. Static roared, and a voice almost screamed beneath the noise. "Mike, we're still trying to bring you back." Then silence. Those words struck me differently. I stared into the bathroom mirror, studying my pale, tired face. Was I losing my mind? Had something happened I couldn't remember? I tried contacting the phone company, police, anyone who might listen. No one took me seriously. The calls continued. Same numbers, same static, same cryptic message. One evening, I discovered small red marks on my arm, arranged in an unfamiliar pattern. The doctor suggested I'd scratched myself while sleeping, but I had no memory of doing so. Another night, I ventured outside, hoping to understand what was happening. Cold fog settled over the street, stars sharp in a clear sky. Suddenly, a bright white light moved silently between the trees. It stopped, pulsing as if watching me. Rooted to the spot, I wanted to run but couldn't move. After a minute, the light vanished. The next morning, a small, smooth, unmarked device sat on my doorstep. I tossed it in the trash, bewildered. Yet the nightly calls persisted, always at the same time. The voice, the numbers, the same haunting message. "We're trying to bring you back." I found myself in a hospital room, completely lost. My memory was a blank slate, with only fragments of my last known moment, watching news on my couch that Saturday morning. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and antiseptic filled the air. The details emerged slowly. A doctor explained I'd been discovered wandering on a nearby hiking trail 3 days earlier, disoriented and dehydrated. No one had reported me missing. When I tried to speak, my throat felt parched, my voice barely a whisper. Something peculiar caught my attention, a cluster of tiny, perfectly round scars on my left forearm. Arranged in a tight circle, they looked fresh, less than a week old. The nurse examined them carefully, puzzled. "No burns, no insect bites, no allergic reactions," she muttered. They planned to run tests. My friend Mark visited, looking concerned. I showed him the mysterious marks, but he offered little insight beyond asking if I was okay. Over the next 2 days, hospital tests revealed nothing unusual. Blood work came back normal, with no signs of infection or toxins. The mystery deepened. No cameras had captured my movements. No witnesses reported seeing me during those 3 missing days. It was as if I'd vanished completely. When discharged, I returned home with an unsettling sensation that something fundamental had changed. The scars continued to perplex me. occasionally itching, a constant reminder of those blank days. I was still trying to understand what happened, who I was, and what might come next. I couldn't sleep. The night was cold, but sweat beaded on my skin. My dreams were a jumble of strange images, soft humming, moving lights, and shapes that defied understanding. Over the next week, the scars from my mysterious encounter demanded my attention. They weren't healing normally. Instead, they seemed to sink deeper into my skin, like an indelible stamp. One evening in the bathroom, the itching intensified. A sharp electric sensation buzzed around my arm. For a split second, I caught a faint glow from the marks. Thin lines of light seemed to pulse just beneath my skin. When I rubbed my arm, the sensation remained. An unsettling feeling of being watched followed me, even in the safety of my home. Early one morning, I returned to the trail where I had been found. Thick fog wound through the trees, creating an eerie silence. I walked slowly, searching for any missed clues. A small clearing surrounded by old pine trees caught my eye. Something was off about the ground. Patches of dead grass, recently moved rocks, and an unnaturally smooth surface in the center, as if something had pressed down with immense force. Crouching, I discovered faint marks in the dirt. They were long and thin, like claw scratches, but too precise to be natural. As my fingers traced the lines, a chill ran through me. A low, soft humming filled the air, making it vibrate. I stood quickly, scanning the area. Nothing but swaying trees and thickening fog surrounded me. Just before leaving, something caught my eye near a tree root. I picked up a small metallic object. It was unlike any metal I'd ever touched, smooth, light, yet heavy, with a strange warmth that seemed to seep into my skin. As I slipped it into my pocket, the humming ceased. Back home, I examined the object under a magnifying glass. Perfectly round with no visible seams or markings, it appeared crafted with precision beyond human capability. That night, the buzzing returned, a constant reminder of the mystery that now consumed my thoughts. My arm pulsed with a faint blue glow, a silent reminder of something I couldn't explain. Sleepless nights became my norm as I watched the light shift beneath my skin. By morning, the scars looked different. The circle had expanded, marks rearranging themselves like living entities moving in patterns beyond my comprehension. Desperate for answers, I called the hospital again. They asked me to come in for another checkup. The doctors were as puzzled as I was. They ran scans, x-rays, ultrasounds, but found nothing. No foreign objects, no hidden injuries. The scars didn't hurt, but they felt invasive, like an alien presence embedded deep within me. One nurse mentioned an old case about unexplained skin markings on hikers, but couldn't elaborate. I left feeling more unsettled than before. At home, the mysterious object I'd found began to hum softly when I was near. It seemed to respond to me, connected somehow to the strange markings. I tried discarding it once, only to find it back on my nightstand the next morning with no explanation. Weeks passed. The buzzing and glowing became my new normal. I avoided mirrors, catching glimpses of shadows moving in impossible ways at the edge of my vision. Friends noticed my distraction, my growing anxiety. I couldn't explain what was happening, so I stopped trying. One night, everything changed. I woke suddenly, feeling like I was falling. The room spun slowly, a loud humming filling my ears. My arm's scars shone brightly, pulsing in sync with the buzzing. A strange pressure built behind my eyes like a veil being pulled back. I closed my eyes and waited. Then, abruptly, it stopped. The light faded, the buzzing ceased, leaving only silence. In the days that followed, the scars slowly disappeared. The glow vanished completely. The object stopped responding. I kept it locked away in a box, a reminder of an experience I couldn't understand. I still don't know its origin or what happened during those 3 missing days. But in moments of quiet solitude, I sometimes hear that distant, faint humming, like a signal trying to reach me. My bedroom was dark and unfamiliar. A small night lamp cast dim light across the floor where I lay, disoriented and sore. Something felt wrong. I blinked, trying to clear my foggy head and make sense of my surroundings. The door was shut tight with no handle or keyhole on my side, just a smooth, unbroken surface. I searched everywhere for my phone, nightstand, bed, floor, dresser, nothing. No keys, no phone. My heart began racing. The window was my next target. I pressed against it, feeling cold seeping through the glass. It was sealed completely from the outside. Through the pain, I could barely make out dark tree branches and sky, but no possible escape route. Then I heard it, tapping, soft, irregular sounds coming from the ceiling vents. Not quite like a person knocking, but steady, as if something was deliberately trying to get my attention. The sound moved along the vents, changing directions. Pause. Start again. A pattern I couldn't understand. I yelled for help, pounding the door with my fists. Silence. My voice sounded strange, muffled, almost unreal. Was anyone even near? I sat on the bed, desperately trying to remember how I'd gotten here. The last clear memory was going to sleep in my Portland apartment after a long day, alone and exhausted. The tapping continued. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, tap. Like a coded message I couldn't decipher. I pulled the blanket over my head, but the sound still penetrated. Empty dresser drawers, a locked closet, sealed vents. I was completely trapped. Hours passed. Time became meaningless. Only the tapping and the air conditioning's soft hum broke the silence. Slowly, I began to realize something was very wrong. The silence was worse than the tapping. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing. Something felt off. The air had changed, growing thicker and colder, with a faint metallic smell that tugged at the edge of my memory. Suddenly, the night lamp flickered, dim, then bright. The room's temperature dropped, and that metallic scent intensified. My skin crawled. I felt eyes on me. The metal vent grate above my bed began to move, sliding slowly as if guided by an unseen force. A soft blue glow leaked through its edges. I was paralyzed, unable to move or breathe. When the vent cover fully opened, I saw a narrow, dark space beyond. The blue light pulsed gently, accompanied by a low mechanical hum. A shadow emerged, elongated, thin, almost translucent. No face, no clear features, just a vague outline. A slender limb reached through the vent. My chest tightened with pure terror. The figure didn't rush. It hovered momentarily, then retracted and vanished as the vent cover slid back into place. I tried to scream, but only a strangled sound escaped. My limbs felt like lead. Darkness consumed the room, and time seemed to stretch endlessly. When the lights returned, everything felt normal again. The room was warmer, but the door remained locked, the window sealed. That's when I noticed the marks on my arm, tiny, perfectly round clusters near my wrist, fresh, raised. I didn't remember getting them. Pressing the marks triggered something. The tapping returned, but this time inside my head. A Morse code of pressure waves, trying to communicate or pull me somewhere unreachable. Desperation consumed me. I screamed, pounded the door, tried breaking the window with a chair leg, but nothing worked. As night deepened, the tapping transformed into whispers, high-pitched, indistinct murmurs from the vents. Sometimes I could swear I heard my own name. I didn't know what happened or why I was locked in that room. The marks on my arm remained unexplained after my hospital visit. Doctors found no bruising, no bites, no allergies, just tiny scars that seemed to defy explanation. The night before, sleep had eluded me. I sat on the bed, gripping my arm and staring at the ceiling vent as whispers drifted in and out. When morning came, the door unlocked without a sound, just a soft pop, and it swung open. I didn't hesitate. I ran into the empty, quiet hallway. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, dead, as if it had been off for days. After charging it, I called Mia, my roommate. She answered immediately, her voice tight with worry. I'd been missing for 3 days, she said. The police had been called, but no leads emerged. I described the locked room, the tapping, the marks. Mia suggested I see a doctor, convinced I was shaken. Her concern was clear in her voice. Over the next week, I tried to rationalize what happened. Stress? Hallucination? Sleep paralysis? But the mark remained, and sometimes the tapping returned when I was alone and quiet. I haven't shared this with many people. It sounds crazy. Even now, in my new apartment, I sometimes hear faint tapping from vents. The metal smell comes and goes. One thing is certain, I want to stay far away from sealed doors and vents. Late at night, these memories still haunt me. The unexplained, the unknown, they linger like a persistent whisper, just beyond understanding. My old Seiko watch, nothing fancy but reliable, ticked softly on my wrist as I sat bundled in my jacket near midnight. Stars dotted the sky above the dark lake. Something caught my eye. A faint glow just beneath the water's surface. Not bright, but pulsing like a slow heartbeat. At first, I thought it might be a reflection or an abandoned fishing lure, but the light was steady, rhythmic. Every 2 or 3 seconds, it would pulse a soft bluish white. "Hello?" I called out. Silence answered. The glow remained in the same spot, maybe 20 feet from shore at chest depth. No boats, no other people around. Curiosity pulled me forward. I tested the water with my foot, cold as expected. The moonlight illuminated tree outlines across the lake, and I decided to investigate. Shedding my jacket, I stepped into the icy water. Soft mud gave way to rocky ground as I moved toward the pulsing light. Its eerily beautiful glow seemed to hover just beneath the surface. When I reached the spot, I dove under. The cold shocked me. For a moment I was disoriented. Opening my eyes, I saw nothing. No glow, no source, just dark water. I surfaced, gasping, and looked around. The light had completely vanished. Checking my watch, I found the second hand frozen between 9 and 10. I tried winding it, shaking it. Nothing. Dead. An unsettling feeling washed over me. Something felt off, though I couldn't explain what. I climbed out and wrapped myself in my jacket, rubbing my arms. My phone showed no signal. Expected, but the silence felt different. Heavier. Watching. I sat back on the rock, shivering more from the strange atmosphere than the cold. The lake returned to stillness. No glow, no sound, except distant wind through the pines. I tried to dismiss the weirdness, but something lingered, an unexplained mystery just beneath the surface. The lake was quiet, moonlight shimmering on its surface. I'd been sitting there for hours, or maybe just minutes. Time felt strange. Something caught my eye, a faint glow beneath the water, like a dying fishing lure or bioluminescent algae. Nothing unusual, I thought, but something was wrong. My legs felt weird, heavy and numb. Tiny, barely visible dots covered my skin, glowing softly. More appeared as I tried to rub them off. A chill ran through me. When I tried to stand, my legs wobbled like gelatin, forcing me back down. The sky looked different. Stars had shifted, as if the night had suddenly jumped forward. My watch was dead. My phone showed 3:14 a.m., battery low but functioning. I couldn't walk straight, stumbling with each attempt. The numbness crept higher. A low, steady humming emerged from beneath the lake. Ripples danced across the water's surface, hinting at movement below. The sound wasn't threatening, almost soothing, like a strange lullaby. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the numbness vanished. My body felt normal again. Disoriented but steady, I stood up. The lake was silent, no trace of the earlier glow or sound. Exhausted, I packed my gear and started hiking back. Dawn's first light began to break. At my car, I called Sarah. She answered immediately, her voice trembling. "Where have you been?" "I'm not sure," I replied. She explained she'd been worried. Suddenly, I realized I couldn't remember anything after setting up camp 2 nights ago. My last clear memory was just arriving at the campsite. Later, in the bathroom mirror, I checked my arms. No glowing dots remained, just a faint redness where the numbness had been. The mystery of the lake's light and my lost time lingered, unexplained. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in western Oregon, the kind of place where nothing unusual ever seems to happen. Rows of modest houses line the streets, with sidewalks cracked from old tree roots and kids riding bikes after school. That's how it used to be, until a few weeks ago when I started noticing something strange about my next-door neighbor. Her house sits right beside mine on Maple Street, with peeling white paint and overgrown bushes. I think her name is Lisa, though I've only heard it once when the mailman shouted it while dropping off packages. She never seemed to leave the house during the day, and the blinds stayed mostly shut. But something was off. The lights inside would flicker on and off at odd hours. Sometimes the porch light would blink for a few seconds before going dark, or the living room lights would switch on late at night and early morning. What struck me most was the complete silence. No TV, no music, no voices, no footsteps. It was like the house was alive but empty. I didn't think much of it at first. People keep to themselves, right? Maybe she worked night shifts or was unwell. I tried waving once when I caught a glimpse of her through a crack in the blinds, but she just retreated into the shadows. After that, I stopped trying. One rainy Thursday night, everything changed. I was up late watching a movie when I heard it, a tapping like metal against glass coming from my bedroom window. The rain was light, just a drizzle, but the tapping was clear and steady, slow but deliberate. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I live alone. My boyfriend was out of town. The clock read 2:17 a.m. I crept toward the window, and the tapping stopped the moment I moved. Pulling back the curtain just enough to peer out, I saw nothing. Wet leaves shivered on the lawn, and the street was empty and dark. The porch light across the street flickered off. My heart was pounding. Was it adrenaline or just confusion? I waited a minute, then went back to bed. The tapping didn't return. Now, everything feels like a strange dream I can't fully wake up from. Sometimes when I'm near water at night, I swear I hear that low hum again, just beneath the surface. Over the next week, strange tapping sounds kept happening at my window, always late at night. When I told my friends about it, they laughed it off as a raccoon or wind, but I knew something was different. The sounds weren't random. They were rhythmic, almost like a deliberate message. I tried tapping back once, but got no response. One cold, wet night, I decided to investigate. I put on my raincoat and went outside, scanning the darkness. No footprints, no signs of anyone. But then I noticed something odd. Lisa's front door was wide open, swinging slightly in the breeze. It was supposed to be locked. I hesitated, phone in hand. Before I could decide whether to call the police or approach the house, the door suddenly slammed shut. Startled, I hurried back inside and locked my own door. I called the non-emergency line, and they promised to send a patrol car. The next day, the police checked Lisa's house. Everything seemed normal. The door was locked, no signs of forced entry, and no one was home. When I asked about Lisa, they couldn't tell me much. No recent visitors, no neighbors reporting anything unusual. That night, the tapping haunted my dreams. It felt like more than just a sound now, almost like a presence. About a week later, I returned home late from work around 11 p.m. As I turned onto my street, I saw Lisa's house differently. Every room was brightly lit, as if someone was moving between them. But I didn't see anyone come or go. At my front door, something caught my eye. On the window ledge sat a small, smooth piece of metal, a thin rectangle about an inch long. It felt cold yet slightly warm. I picked it up carefully, looking around. No one was in sight. Inside, I cleaned the metal object and placed it on my kitchen table. It was unlike anything I'd seen before. No scratches or marks, but it reflected light strangely, sometimes with a faint blue glow, other times just dully. That night, I kept it on my nightstand, wondering about its origin. The metal piece on my desk had been with me for a while now. At first, it seemed harmless, but things started changing. The tapping began quietly, almost imperceptibly. Late at night, when silence filled the room, I'd hear it, a rhythmic, persistent sound that seemed to be calling out. My bedroom window became a focal point. Rain pelted the glass, creating a misty barrier. Through the condensation, I caught a fleeting glimpse of something. A shape, a silhouette, but when I blinked, it vanished. I tried convincing myself it was just my imagination, but the tapping grew louder, more deliberate. Days passed, and the metal piece felt different, warmer, almost alive. I couldn't bring myself to discard it, even though something felt off. The tapping only occurred when I was alone. It never happened when Sarah was home. One evening, after dining out, I returned to find Lisa's house dark and shuttered. Then I saw it, a perfect circular cut in one of her window blinds, positioned precisely at eye level. That night, the tapping intensified, emanating directly from that window. As I lay awake, something changed. The tapping C, acid, replaced by a low, vibrating hum that seemed to breathe through the walls and glass. A pressure built in my chest, holding me immobile. Outside, a blue-white light began to swirl and shift. The window transformed. No longer solid, it became liquid-like, revealing shadowy, elongated figures moving just beneath its surface. Tall, unnaturally slender shapes that didn't resemble anything human. When I next became aware, I was on the floor, heart racing. Examining my wrist, I discovered 3 precisely spaced, faint marks, as if a hot metal stamp had pressed against my skin. They were slightly raised but painless, and they refused to fade. Doctors dismissed them as some minor irritation, but I knew differently. Now, everything has returned to normal. Lisa's house remains dark, and I'm left wondering about her existence. The tapping has stopped, but the metal piece remains, a silent reminder of that inexplicable night. We'd been dreaming of a quieter life when we moved upstate. The old brick house on the town's edge wasn't much, but it felt like our fresh start. Clara, our 6-month-old Emma, and I spent that first day unpacking and settling in, excited about our new home. The first nights passed normally, filled with typical baby sounds. We used a simple audio baby monitor, the kind you'd expect in an area with patchy cell service. On the third night, everything changed. I was on the couch, phone in hand, while Clara slept beside me. Through the monitor, I heard an unusual sound. Not Emma's usual noises, but a steady, rhythmic knocking. At first, I thought it might be pipes or the house settling, but something felt off. I muted the monitor and listened carefully. The knocking continued, quiet but consistent, like a slow heartbeat. I walked to Emma's room and discovered the walls were solid concrete. When I knocked on them myself, I realized the sound wasn't coming from pipes or floorboards. Clara woke up when I told her, but she seemed skeptical. That night, the knocking persisted, always through the monitor, always in the nursery. I sat with Emma, watching her sleep, trying to understand the source. There was no wind, no rain, just an unsettling stillness. The sound seemed loudest across from the crib. Days passed, and the knocking became more regular. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Clara began to notice it too, her worry growing. We tried recording the sound, but when we played it back, nothing was there. It was as if the knocking only existed through the baby monitor. Determined to understand, I climbed into the attic and searched inside the walls. Something had changed, but I couldn't explain what. The tapping continued, not on the window, but inside the walls. I just knew something was different. The baby monitor crackled with an odd sound that night. At first, the knocking had been steady and predictable, but now it seemed different, almost like a form of communication. Emma would stir slightly each time, her tiny fingers twitching or her eyes blinking in a way that suggested she sensed something I couldn't. I'd already checked the walls thoroughly earlier, finding no unusual echoes or hollow spots. Everything felt solid and normal, yet something was changing. Around 2 a.m. one night, I was watching the nursery through the monitor when a low hum joined the irregular knocking. The screen suddenly went black, cutting off all audio. When it flickered back to life, the sound was distorted, a deep, pulsing vibration that seemed to breathe through the speakers. The room's temperature plummeted. My breath clouded in the suddenly cold air. Emma lay perfectly still in her crib, and across from her, the concrete wall began to shimmer, almost like it was alive, moving in rhythm with the knocking. When I called Clara, she stared in disbelief. The wall pulsed subtly, then the knocking slowed and stopped. The mem faded into silence. By morning, everything looked normal, just cold, solid concrete. We started digging into the house's history and discovered it was built on an old Cold War bunker site. The thick walls made sense now, but not the strange sounds. A contractor found nothing unusual. No weird wiring, no hidden passages. The house was completely normal. Yet the experiences continued, leaving us unsettled and searching for answers. The knocking grew urgent, almost desperate. I searched the nursery, but Emma had vanished. Panic rose inside me as I looked everywhere. A soft, childlike giggle caught my attention, drifting from behind the shimmering wall. My hand pressed against the concrete, and suddenly the knocking transformed into a steady vibration. Like ripples spreading across a pond, the shimmer expanded. Heat radiated through the wall, first warm, then scorching. My vision narrowed, the room blurring around me. Something pulled me forward as if gravity had shifted. When awareness returned, I stood in the nursery once more. Emma lay peacefully in her crib, asleep. The wall was just concrete again. Clara sat in the corner, pale and trembling. We never discussed what followed, but that night changed everything. The knocking ceased, the shimmer disappeared, the baby monitor functioned normally. The house fell silent. Yet sometimes when I'm alone in the nursery, a faint knocking whispers at the edge of hearing, just enough to remind me that some mysteries defy explanation. Late one night, I drove home from Matt's place in upstate New York. Early March brought cold, slick roads that wound through empty back roads. My phone was charging, connected to a long conversation with my sister Jenna, one of those rare calls where we catch up on everything and nothing. She was mid-story about her job, complaining about her nightmare boss and considering quitting. I half listened, focused on the dark road ahead. Suddenly the call fragmented, signal dropping, then silence. But not complete silence. Breathing, slow, deep, deliberate. So close it felt like someone was right next to the phone, lips nearly touching the speaker. I gripped the steering wheel, eyes scanning the darkness. Headlights cut through trees lining the narrow road, nothing unusual outside. Just me and the cold night. I tried calling back, voicemail, again and again. No response. The night was already strange when the call dropped mid-conversation. Something about the connection felt off. The breathing was too clear, too deliberate to be accidental. I tried to shake off the weird feeling that something was watching me, dismissing it as a potential prank or random interference. About 10 minutes down the road, my phone died completely. The battery plummeted from 20% to 0 in seconds. I pulled over, switched on the interior light, and tried to check the device. No response. I plugged it in again. Nothing. Sitting in the darkness with the engine idling, I started to get uneasy. Through the windshield, the stars looked different. Instead of twinkling, they formed a cluster of white lights pulsing with an unusual rhythm, steady like a heartbeat, not blinking like typical aircraft. Each time I tried to get a better view, the lights would shift just enough to hide behind the trees. I stepped out of the car. The cold hit me immediately. Gravel crunched under my boots as I stood in complete silence, squinting at the sky. These weren't navigation lights. The pattern was too precise, too controlled. Something was hovering, completely still. Suddenly, the lights intensified. An icy blue glow flooded the road and surrounding trees. I shielded my eyes as the air seemed to thicken and hum. Panicked, I rushed back to the car and locked the doors. The lights dimmed, but the low, constant hum remained. The dashboard clock was frozen at 11:42 p.m., exactly when the Cal L had dropped. The engine wouldn't start. Radio, electronics, everything was dead. The car was completely shut down. Then I heard it again, the breathing. But this time it wasn't through the phone. It was inside the car. Slow, controlled, right behind me. I twisted around but saw nothing. The windows were fogged, my breath creating misty patterns on the glass. I was driving home late one November night on Highway 89, winding between Lake Tahoe and Truckee. The road was empty, dark trees stretching like shadows on both sides. Cold air fogged the windows despite the heater blasting. Just before Donner Summit, I spotted a woman standing by the roadside, thumb out, her jacket soaked and body shivering. I almost kept driving. This highway has a reputation for strange encounters, but something made me slow down, pull over. When she climbed in, her breathing was ragged, her skin pale and cold. We didn't speak much, just the sound of her breathing and the car's engine. The next few weeks became a blur of strange occurrences. My phone started acting weird, glitching, freezing with static and faint whispers. I bought a new one, but nothing changed. The breathing followed me, first in dreams, then in quiet moments at home, soft, rhythmic, right in my ear. No one was there. I tried telling Jenna, but she dismissed it as stress. Maybe she was right. I started avoiding night drives, staying indoors after dark. Lights would flicker in rooms with no bulbs. Shadows moved just beyond my vision. That low, persistent hum buzzed beneath the floorboards. The last time I heard the breathing, I was on my porch before dawn. Cloudy sky, thick fog hanging in the air. I looked up, half expecting those pulsing lights to return. They didn't, but something was watching, waiting. My hands shook driving home that night, eyes darting between road and rearview mirror. When I finally arrived, I locked every door and window, though the house was empty, warm, quiet. My phone remained dead, unresponsive. Weeks have passed, and still I feel something's out there, breathing, watching, waiting. The night was quiet and cold when I decided to pull over. I don't usually stop for hitchhikers, but something about her caught my attention. Her eyes seemed to plead for help. She got in quickly, saying a soft thank you as she settled into the passenger seat. Her name was Lisa. We drove in silence, the heater humming and tires crunching on the gravel. I caught glimpses of her from the corner of my eye, pale, wide eyes that looked like they hadn't seen sleep in days. A strange scent hung in the air, a mix of cold metal and something sweet. Suddenly, I realized she was gone. I glanced in the rearview mirror, then turned around. The back seat was completely empty. The door was locked, the seat belt untouched. Her wet jacket had vanished without a trace. I blinked hard, hoping my eyes were playing tricks, but nothing changed. The metallic smell lingered, an electric charge hanging in the air where she had been moments before. My heart raced as I pulled over, surrounded by dense forest and silence. An owl hooted in the distance. I called out her name, my voice breaking, but received no response. I got out of the car, flashlight in hand, searching the shoulder of the road. No footprints, no sign of Lisa, nothing. The forest seemed to press in around me, thick and heavy, with something watching just beyond the trees. I wanted to call the police, but how could I explain a hitchhiker who simply disappeared? Shaking, I started the car and pulled back onto the highway. The metallic smell intensified briefly, then faded. For the rest of the drive, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her sitting there. But the back seat remained empty. When I finally pulled into my driveway around 1:30 a.m., the house was dark and quiet. I sat in the car for a moment, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I started hiking that morning just before sunrise. Early May, and the air was crisp, maybe a bit too cold for just a long-sleeve shirt. I figured I'd warm up once I got moving. The trailhead was tucked away in the Cascades, not too far from where I grew up, but remote enough that you wouldn't expect many people. That was exactly why I picked it. The plan was simple: hike in, spend some hours alone, then come back before dark. I wasn't carrying a lot, just a small pack with water, a granola bar, my phone, and a map. I usually didn't bother with the map since I'd been on this trail a couple times, but this time I wanted to be sure. I didn't get far before the woods closed in around me and the sounds of the road disappeared behind. For the first hour, everything was normal. Birds chirping, the crunch of pine needles underfoot, the occasional squirrel darting away. The trail was narrow but clear. The trees leaned in, mostly fire and cedar, their branches thick with needles. I stopped once or twice to catch my breath and snap pictures of wild flowers. The sun rose higher, sending pale shafts of light through the canopy. Then I noticed something. I was near a bend in the trail where a large cedar had fallen across the path a few years back. Usually there was a clear way around it, a dirt detour people had worn down. But that morning, it wasn't like that. The branches that blocked the path seemed different. Days later, I'd be thinking about Lisa and that strange encounter. The metallic scent in my car wouldn't leave me alone. I kept smelling it, even after I turned off the heater and opened the windows. It was faint, but definitely there. I grabbed a cloth and wiped down the back seat, but it wouldn't go away. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. The next morning I told my sister about it. She just looked at me like I'd lost it. Said maybe I was overtired or the stress was getting to me. But I kept thinking about the way Lisa looked, how scared she seemed, like she wasn't just stranded, but running from something. And the smell. That smell. I found a small patch of wetness on the floor where her feet might have rested. I cleaned it up, but no matter what I did, the metallic scent never completely left the car. Sometimes at night, I swear I can still catch it faint and cold, like a warning or a reminder. I don't know who Lisa was or where she went, but I'm pretty sure she wasn't just a hitchhiker. The branches looked deliberately rearranged, forming jagged lines and unnatural angles. I crouched down and touched a broken twig, feeling its fresh sap still sticky. No footprints marked the ground, no signs of recent human passage. Just pine and moss scents surrounded me. Something felt off. The forest seemed different, not quite right. When I glanced behind me, entire landscapes had transformed. Massive old cedars I'd seen earlier were gone, replaced by younger trees growing in strange, twisted patterns. Their trunks bent at impossible angles. The moss on nearby rocks looked unnaturally vivid, more like a rainforest ecosystem than the Cascades. I blinked hard, wondering if light was playing tricks. Shaking my head, I tried to clear my mind and retrace my steps. But the trail had vanished completely, as if it never existed. Turning in a full circle, I scanned the area, my heart beating faster but still controlled. I called out hello, but the woods swallowed my voice. My phone showed no signal. The map revealed nothing familiar. Landmarks, rock formations, even the hill's slope, everything was wrong. It felt like I was inside a forest that resembled mine, but wasn't mine at all. Walking what I thought was the return direction, I encountered the same broken branch patterns after just 10 minutes. A strange sensation crept in, as if the forest was Wachai, Nang perhaps guiding me somewhere unknown. Then I heard it, a low, steady humming. Not mechanical, not natural, but a vibration hanging in the air. It pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Behind a cluster of trees, a pale white glow emerged, unlike sunlight. I wasn't sleeping well to begin with. Stress, work, whatever. March rolled around, and my nights became a strange ritual of restlessness. I'd go to bed around 10, then just lie there for hours, trapped in a liminal space between wakefulness and sleep. When sleep finally claimed me, the dream was always the same. I was floating, not flying, not falling, just suspended as if my body no longer belonged to me. Completely immobile, I couldn't turn my head or wiggle a single finger. Face up, weightless, like being underwater, but without pressure or sound. A sterile, bright space stretched endlessly in every direction. The ceiling, if you could call it that, looked like glowing panels, reminiscent of a hospital, but impossibly clean and symmetrical. Though I couldn't see anyone, I always felt watched. Shadows lingered at the edges of my vision, tall, unmoving shapes that never touched me, but made their presence known. I'd wake with an electric tension in my jaw, as if I'd been clenching it all night. Living in a duplex didn't help the feeling of being observed. Then came that day in the forest. Trees ahead and a light unlike anything I'd seen before. No flames, no flicker, just a steady, unnatural glow. Something compelled me forward, but my feet felt heavy, sinking into the soil. Branches grew sticky around me like cobwebs catching on my jacket. As I approached, the air chilled dramatically despite the sun overhead. My breath formed thin clouds in the morning light. The brightness forced me to squint. Hovering about 10 feet off the ground was a vague shape, a misty, shimmering oval that seemed to shift and pulse. Just as I reached out, almost touching it, everything went silent. No birds, no wind, no humming. The light blinked off. The forest snapped back to normal. I was standing exactly where I'd been hours before, the cedar tree fallen across the path just as I remembered. My phone buzzed, full signal. I walked out, heart pounding but face dry. When Katie asked if I'd had fun, I simply said, yeah. That night, I discovered a new photo in my gallery, one I hadn't taken. The pale, shifting light hovered just above the ground. I don't know how it got there or why I've kept it. I haven't returned to the forest. From the road, everything looks normal. But sometimes when the wind shifts just right, I swear I hear that humming again. I live on a quiet street on the suburban edge of Boise, with Glenn as my neighbor to the right. Our interactions are usually limited to quick hellos when taking out the trash. For almost 2 weeks, I'd been having these dreams. I didn't share them with anyone, not out of fear, but because they seemed too bizarre. I chalked them up to sleep paralysis or some weird sleep disorder. Strange occurrences started piling up. The hallway lights would flicker, but only at night, right after the dream. The ceiling fixture would dim ever so slightly, just for a moment. In my bedroom, I noticed peculiar scratches near the baseboards, not like animal marks, but faint, evenly spaced lines running parallel about 6 inches from the floor. Cleaning them made no difference. Then came the noise. Between 2 and 3 a.m., I'd wake up to a low, persistent hum. It wasn't coming from outside or any appliance. This sound seemed to exist in the air itself, almost more felt than heard. Like a tuning fork pressed against bone, it made my teeth feel strange. One night, I woke up completely stretched out, arms at my sides, totally unlike my usual sleeping position. The ceiling light flickered, and the hum was stronger, almost vibrating my pillow. Startled, I sat up quickly. Instantly, the noise stopped, and the light stabilized. A few mornings later, while watering my driveway planter, Glenn appeared to grab his newspaper. He looked terrible, pale, sweaty, with dark circles under his eyes. When I asked if he'd had a rough night, he gave a humorless laugh and asked if I'd ever had vivid dreams. His description chilled me. For weeks, he'd been experiencing the same thing, floating in a bright white room, unable to move, sensing something nearby but unable to see it. He kept waking up feeling fundamentally wrong. I just stared, stunned. He quickly brushed it off, telling me to forget about it. Glenn and I had been experiencing strange occurrences that we couldn't explain. That night, we decided to document what was happening. We set up a basic monitoring system. Glenn positioned an old security camera facing his bed, and I downloaded a sleep tracking app that would record audio. We took half a melatonin, watched a movie, and went to sleep around midnight. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I found myself in a familiar paralyzed state, unable to move or speak. Something tall glided past me, and an intense pressure built behind my eyes. When I woke up at 9:30 a.m., I checked the sleep app. There was a single recording from 3:17 a.m. I played it. After a few seconds of silence, a metallic click emerged, followed by a layered rising hum. Then came whispers that sounded like a synthesized backward language. I rushed next door to Glenn. He looked pale and disoriented. He'd woken up on his kitchen floor, his shirt inside out. The bedroom camera had shut off at 3:16 a.m., but it captured one strange frame. The bed was neatly made and empty. In the corner, a thin, tall shape stood, not quite human, with a flat head and long, slightly bent arms. It looked partially transparent, as if bleeding into the room. Earlier, Glenn had shared his ongoing experiences: unexplained humming, static in the walls, clocks blinking despite being on separate circuits. He'd even woken up in the backyard once, barefoot and freezing, with no memory of how he got there. When I told him I'd had the same dream, he broke down crying, admitting he thought he was losing his mind. The last weekend of September before winter hit found us at our little cabin in northern Minnesota. Tucked away off a dirt road barely visible on GPS, this place was our weekend escape. My dad and I had built it years ago, starting as a hunting shack and slowly improving it with insulation, solar power, and a well pump. Cozy and cell service free, it's exactly what we wanted. Becca and I arrived after dark on Friday. Our routine was familiar. I started the fire while she unpacked groceries. Later, we sat on the porch, soaking in the unique silence of these woods. No traffic, no barking dogs, just wind-rustling trees and occasional owl calls. Around 11, something changed. Snapping sounds emerged, like footsteps on sticks. First close, then about 50 feet away. I swept the area with my flashlight, but saw nothing. A deer or porcupine, I thought. Becca grew uneasy. She hates uncertainty in the wilderness. I walked the tree line, searching. Nothing appeared, but an unsettling sensation lingered. We felt watched. Morning revealed our trail camera lying in the dirt. Strapped to a birch 15 feet from the cabin, it hadn't fallen. Someone, or something, had deliberately unbuckled the strap. I initially blamed a bear's curiosity, but no scratches or marks suggested animal interference. The camera was pristine. We brought it inside and powered it up. The battery was full, the storage card complete. Plugging it into my laptop, I found 86 clips from that night. The first few showed typical forest movement. Then things got strange. Glenn and I stared at that image for an eternity before he deleted it. Now we exchange polite waves, avoiding discussion. The dream hasn't returned for either of us. But sometimes the hum comes back, just a fleeting second as I drift off like a cryptic reminder. The video footage started normally enough, just a rabbit hopping by. Then everything changed at 11:13 p.m. The screen went black, but not like regular darkness. It was more like a corrupted video feed. Static bars, bizarre pixelation, total visual nonsense that continued through clip after clip. After nearly 2 hours of unreadable footage, one clip stood out. About 30 seconds long and time-stamped at 12:42 a.m., it was shot inside our cabin. I recognized our bed immediately. The flannel sheets, the old headboard. Becca and I were both asleep, breathing slowly, completely still. The camera angle was low, positioned on the floor at the foot of the bed. And there, barely visible at the top edge of the frame, something was standing, just a sliver of it. Long, pale ears curled around the camera's edge, bent at impossible angles. Too many joints. Not human at all. I scrubbed the timeline back and forth. No sound, no movement, just that single, frozen frame before the file ended. I didn't tell Becca right away. Instead, I closed the laptop and made up an excuse about corrupted footage. But she knew something was wrong. That afternoon, she found and watched the file herself. When I entered the bedroom, she was already packing. We left within the hour, driving back to Duth and staying at her sister's place. For days, we avoided discussing what we'd seen. Then the dream started. I'd wake up with a low, static-like buzzing in my head. No memory of the dream, just a feeling of restless sleep. Once, I found myself standing in the hallway holding my pillow. Another time, unexplained mud covered my feet. Becca's experience was worse. Nosebleeds struck between 2 and 3 a.m. She'd wake up dizzy, her arms numb. Once, she claimed to see a silent, bluish light streaming through the ceiling, like a ghostly flashlight. When I suggested seeing a doctor, She refused, insisting it wouldn't help. 2 weeks later, I returned to the cabin alone. I told myself I was checking for a break-in or some kind of prank. The front door was still locked. Nothing seemed disturbed. The weather station still runs on solar power, but we don't discuss what happened anymore. I'd been on the Flat Creek Trail in northern Arizona before, a 26-mile round trip, but never this late in fall. That night, I parked at the trailhead around 6:30, deciding to sleep in my Subaru rather than hike in darkness. It was a remote backcountry spot, just a gravel pull-off, a wooden kiosk, and a distant pit toilet. No cell service, no other vehicles. The nearest paved road was 10 miles behind me. Temperature dropped quickly after sunset. By 9 p.m., I was zipped in my sleeping bag, watching my breath fog the windows. Sleep didn't come easily. Tiny sounds kept me alert. Subtle scuffs and crunches outside, spaced just irregularly enough to prevent me from drifting off. Mice, probably, or maybe a raccoon. Eventually I did fall asleep. Around 1:40 a.m., I awoke to a strange sensation. Not a sound, but a weird pressure in my head, similar to the uncomfortable feeling when your ears don't equalize during a mountain drive. My sinuses felt congested, and I realized I wasn't breathing through my nose. As I sat up and tried to clear my sinuses, the knocking began. 3 slow, measured knocks. Not aggressive, but deliberate. Later, when I returned to the cabin, nothing seemed disturbed. No broken windows, no animal tracks. The trail camera was back on the tree, reattached at the same height and strap, as if it had never been moved. But the SD card was gone. I searched everywhere, digging through grass, checking the cabin, dismantling the firewood stack. Nothing. A persistent headache followed me home. A tight pressure behind my eyes wore, than any sinus pain. It lingered until I returned to the highway. Months later, our laptop, the one with the mysterious video, stopped booting. A repair shop confirmed the hard drive had been wiped, with no explanation. We never understood what was in that room or how the camera was positioned. The angle was too low for a standing person. And those fingers, they weren't human. They were something else entirely. Hours passed with a rhythmic, haunting sound. Tap, tap, tap. Right above me on the car's roof, I froze. The knocks repeated every few minutes, always 3 times, always slow. No shifting, no scuffling, just that precise pattern echoing through the night. I stayed motionless, listening. The sound continued for hours, preventing any chance of sleep. As dawn approached, pale gray-blue light crept around the window's edges. 10 minutes after first light, I carefully unzipped the back hatch and slipped out in my socks, crouching low. Circling the car, I found nothing unusual. The soft, powdery red dust was perfect for tracking, yet no footprints marred the ground except my own. Standing up, I examined the roof. A massive dent dominated the center, bowed down about 2 inches. The metal looked bruised, but not scraped or punctured. Climbing onto the bumper for a closer look, I discovered a broad depression about 3 feet across, centered directly over the car's middle. No claw marks, no dirt, no residue, just warped metal and undisturbed dust. Something incredibly heavy had clearly stood there, yet left no trace. I abandoned my planned hike and drove straight back to Flagstaff. The pressure in my head lifted as soon as I hit pavement. Constantly checking the rearview mirror, I felt watched. That night, I parked in my driveway under a bright streetlight, staring at the unchanged roof dent. My quiet street offered no explanation. No big trucks, no low-hanging branches could account for such a precise, heavy presence. Days later, I asked a mechanic friend to examine the roof, revealing nothing of my experience. The weight and silence of whatever had been on my car haunted me. How could something so heavy leave no trace? Wyoming, Route 287, 2:45 in the morning. I was hauling lumber from Missoula to Amarillo, planning to stop near Rollins. But the fog was unlike anything I'd seen before. Heavy, low, and suffocating like cold smoke. The road vanished just 20 feet ahead, my high beams useless. I slowed to 25 miles per hour, hazards blinking. Normally I don't stop unless absolutely necessary. Yet something about this fog made my skin crawl. The CB radio was eerily silent. No trucker chatter, no weather complaints. Even the radio stations only spat static. I kept driving. 5 miles later, I saw him. A naked man standing on the center line, pale as paper, arms hanging limp. Completely motionless, his head tilted so far back I thought his neck might break. I barely stopped in time, my trailer fishtailing slightly but staying aligned. For a moment I sat frozen, my foot trembling on the brake. He didn't move. I wondered if he was high, in shock, maybe from a crash I couldn't see. But there were no tire tracks, no flashing hazards, no other lights, just me, my idling truck, and this man staring into nothingness. I cracked the window, called out, no response. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down. The air was absolutely silent, no wind, no crickets, no truck hum, just silence and fog. 10 feet away, I stopped. His eyes were wide open, mouth closed, jaw slack, chest unmoving. He didn't flinch when I called out again. Then slowly he lowered his head and looked at me, or rather, through me. Weeks later, my buddy noticed a strange dent in my truck. He said it looked like something was settling under weight, but couldn't explain how. No corrosion, no impact, just a slow, even pressure. I didn't explain. I just said I must have missed something. I don't sleep in the car anymore. The night started with a strange voicemail from my brother Alex around 1:40 a.m. I missed it while brushing my teeth and only noticed it the next morning. The transcript was cryptic. They're here. They're outside the tent. When I played the audio, it was garbled and cut off abruptly. Later that year, I was driving my usual route. The stretch of road was quiet, fog hanging low. I spotted a man standing alone, and something felt off immediately. I called out, "Hey man, are you all right? You need help?" And moved closer, my light illuminating his bare feet. His toes were dirty but not bloody. He just stood there, motionless, as if dropped from the sky. Slowly, he opened his mouth, jaw unhinging like he was about to speak. But no sound emerged. It wasn't like he was choking or mute. The air itself seemed broken, sound impossible. Suddenly, everything went dark. Not a gradual fade, but an instant switch. I didn't black out or feel dizzy. In a blink, I was somewhere else. When I came to, I was back in my truck's cab, parked on the shoulder. The sun was rising, no fog remained, and the mysterious man was gone. My engine was off, with no memory of stopping. The logbook showed I'd lost about 4 hours. My coffee thermos sat cold in the cup holder, and my phone was dead despite being at 60% earlier. The CB radio crackled with truckers complaining about cattle backups near Casper. I thoroughly checked the truck, no damage, no signs of going off-road. Tires were clean, trailer locked securely. But something was strange. The dust on the driver's door handle had been wiped completely clean. For the next 20 minutes, no other vehicles passed me. The first car I saw was a beat-up sedan heading north. Its driver didn't even glance my way. In daylight, the road looked entirely normal. No tire marks, no footprints, no evidence of anything unusual. I continued to Amarillo, dropped the trailer, and filed the delivery as usual. I said nothing about the time gap to dispatch, and they didn't question it. Sometimes delays happen. That was in 2017. Since then, I've driven that route maybe a dozen times. I always slow down near that stretch, though I can't pinpoint the exact mile marker. Whenever I try to remember the details, it feels like recalling someone else's dream. One thing's certain, I never drive that route in the dark anymore. I got a voicemail from Alex around 1:42 a.m. on Monday, his voice low and panicked, whispering urgently. He said they were right outside his tent, with shadows and soft rustling sounds, then silence. I called back immediately, but only reached voicemail. I dressed quickly and drove the 10 minutes to his apartment, but his Subaru was gone. The neighbor mentioned Alex had left Friday night for a solo weekend hike in Linville Gorge, before the fall crowds arrived. He'd chosen a spot off the east rim past the Table Rock trailhead, an area with no cell service. I assumed the voicemail had been delayed until he hit a signal, but something felt off. This was Tuesday, not Sunday morning. I contacted the park office and sheriff's department. A ranger named Ray met me at the visitor center, taking down the coordinates Alex had texted before leaving. By evening, they'd located his campsite, a small clearing half a mile from the main trail, hidden behind a boulder. Everything at the site looked normal. The tent was staked tightly, food bag hung properly, no signs of disturbance. But the tent's zipper was bizarre, completely fused shut, as if welded together, with no burn marks. The plastic was warped and distorted like cooled candle wax. When they cut the tent open, the interior was untouched. Sleeping bag rolled out, flashlight in its pocket, boots neatly placed by the door, and a marked map of the Linville River route. Everything was perfectly in order, except Alex was nowhere to be found. They logged it as a missing persons case. But 3 days later, I received another unexpected communication. I was already awake when the voicemail came in at 4:09 a.m. Same number, still listed under Alex. I grabbed my phone the second it buzzed and answered, but no one was there. Just the call ending, followed by a new message alert. I hit play. The message started with shuffling sounds, then Alex's voice, slower, slurred. "I'm not where I was. The trees are gone. I don't know. Katie, I'm not on the mountain anymore." A long pause followed. Then something I couldn't quite make out, sounding like "no sky here." Then a strange tone, a pressure pressing down through the speaker, unlike anything I'd heard before. The message ended. I forwarded it to the ranger. Reyes called an hour later, asking where I got the recording. I explained it came from his number, just like before. Her response surprised me. His phone had been found at the campsite, still in the mesh pocket with a dead battery. She wanted to physically pick up the audio, not email it. I agreed, but she never showed. That night, I decided to investigate further. Using a waveform editor from work, I plugged my phone into the laptop to isolate the background sounds. Expanding the timeline revealed something odd, a blocky, almost uniform section with no visible variation. When I boosted the gain and cleaned up the background, I discovered something beneath the surface. A mechanical, layered breathing and a clicking sound like wet fingers tapping glass. Suddenly the file corrupted. The screen went gray, the laptop crashed, and the recording vanished. That was 2 years ago. The case remains technically open. No body was found, no tracks discovered. Only one other camping group reported anything unusual. A couple from Durham whose dog went crazy around 2 a.m., barking uncontrollably at the tree line. They were camped about a mile from Alex's tent. The woman recalled a weird stillness afterward. No crickets, no breeze, just total silence for a few minutes, as if the woods had been paused before everything rushed back at once. The dogs broke the night's silence with an unusual bark. Not their typical coyote warning, but something different. Short, clipped sounds followed by an eerie half-growl, half-whimper that suggested both fear and aggression. I was awake instantly, boots on without socks, flashlight in hand. My property stretches across 38 acres outside Mason City, Iowa. Pastures, a small timber patch, a barn on the east side, and the house set back from a gravel drive. No neighbors, just an endless landscape of sky, corn, and cattle. When I stepped outside, the world had gone completely still. No crickets, no wind, not even the trees moved. Above the barn, something hung suspended, a white glow that pulsed steadily. Not like a spotlight, but more like a jellyfish floating in the air. 3-second intervals of light, then darkness. I switched off my flashlight and watched, feeling the charged atmosphere similar to pre-thunderstorm conditions, though the sky was clear and studded with stars. The cattle caught my attention next. All 23 were gathered in the front pasture beyond the gravel drive, positioned in an impossibly perfect circle. Each animal stood with equal spacing, facing outward toward the fields, heads raised, completely motionless. When I approached, they didn't react. No movement, no sound, just like statues. I've stopped sharing the full details with most people. They assume typical explanations, a wandering hiker, an animal incident. But I know what I heard in that moment. Something was outside, and it definitely didn't want anyone opening the tent. The barn was bathed in a light brighter than any full moon. My shadows stretched out, thin and long, forming a perfect circle on the ground. I wasn't consciously walking backward, but I found myself moving down the gravel path. Something felt off. I wasn't afraid, just deeply confused, like I'd stepped out of sync with reality. My heart was calm, but everything around me felt strange. As I approached the barn, the light above began pulsing faster. No sound accompanied it, just a soft, rhythmic breathing, on, off, on, off. When I got within 20 yards, my consciousness seemed to skip. It wasn't sleep or fainting, more like someone had hit fast forward on a video. In an instant, I blinked and found myself in the same spot, but now the sky was pitch black. The light was gone, and suddenly I was freezing. Seriously cold. My flashlight was still clutched in my hand, its rubber grip now covered in dew. My shirt was damp, my boot toes soaked. Walking back to the house, my legs felt stiff, as if I'd been standing motionless for hours. The dogs were huddled behind the wood stove, unmoving. I checked the wall clock, 8:24. My wristwatch also read 8:24, though it had shown 2:13 when I first went out. 6 entire hours had vanished. I'd done nothing but walk from the porch to the pasture. I made coffee and watched the sunrise from the kitchen window. The cows remained in their original position. Around 8:45, they began dispersing, one by one. No drama, no panic, just casually walking away as if nothing unusual had occurred. By 9, they were grazing normally. I investigated the barn. Everything appeared untouched. Tools hung neatly, the feed bin was closed, no burn marks anywhere. But the grass where the cows had stood was distinctly different. Not trampled, just perfectly flattened, as if pressed by an invisible force. I kept silent that day. A week later, another oddity emerged. My watch started running 6 hours fast every morning. Precisely 6 hours, not slightly more or less. I'd reset it, wear it normally, and it would be fine all day. But each morning, it would jump ahead exactly 6 hours. Eventually, I stopped wearing it and sold it. The night was cool and clear, early September in Rockbridge County, with a deep silence settling into the woods. We were heading home from a camping trip, Mark, Jess, Eric, and me, packed tight in Mark's old Jeep on County Road 13. Just past 4 a.m., something strange happened. A deer stood in the middle of the narrow road, completely motionless. Not the typical deer in headlights freeze, but an unnatural stillness that felt wrong. Its eyes were open, fixed on us, without a single twitch or breath. I've seen deer before, but never like this. The kind of stillness that raises goosebumps. Mark slowed down, flicking the headlights back and forth. We went quiet, watching. Then everything changed. The air shifted subtly, the engine sound faded, tire noise stopped. Even the wind seemed to disappear. For maybe 10 seconds, the world held its breath. Our voices felt distant, underwater. Jess whispered, "What the hell?" And suddenly, everything snapped back. The deer was gone. No rustling bushes, no running animal, just empty blacktop and low-hanging fog. That's when we noticed our watches. All of them, Mark's digital, Jess's smartwatch, Eric's analog, and mine, showed exactly 4:17 a.m. We hadn't moved. Nothing had changed except the deer vanishing and time jumping forward. We checked twice, disbelieving. The dashboard clock matched. We'd been staring at that deer for at least a minute, maybe more, but the clock was frozen. Mark started driving again, slowly. The woods remained unnaturally quiet. Now, the pasture stays empty. Just hay. Nothing else has happened, but I've covered the kitchen clock. I can't stand seeing that time anymore. The cows sometimes line up along the fence, staring toward the barn at dusk. I can't look at them the same way. At 4:17 a.m., the silence was absolute. No crickets? Ist an owl, just complete stillness. Jess broke the quiet with a shaky voice, asking if the deer had just vanished. Eric's nervous laugh did little to ease the tension. The engine sputtered and died, leaving us stranded in the middle of nowhere. Mark tried the ignition repeatedly, but the Jeep remained lifeless. No cell signal, no explanation for our situation. Then the lights appeared, soft, pulsing, almost alive, nothing like car headlights or flashlights. They moved quickly between the trees, casting long shadows. We sat frozen, not wanting to startle whatever was approaching. The glow crept closer, just beyond the Jeep's edge. Mark reached for his phone, but the screen was dead and unresponsive. Jess whispered, "What is that?" The air felt thick, like breathing underwater. Suddenly the light shot upward, swelling like a bright balloon. White and blue tones illuminated the trees, accompanied by a low, vibrating hum. It didn't terrify me, but my skin crawled. The light formed a shifting, liquid metal dome about 20 feet above the ground, right where the deer had been. Then everything stopped. The humming ceased, and an eerie stillness descended. Our watches now read 4:17 exactly again. Mark checked his phone one last time, still dead. In an instant, we were outside the Jeep, standing near the road's edge. No one spoke at first. Jess broke the silence, her voice trembling. "Did we just get moved?" Eric's pale face showed pure confusion. I ran my hand through my hair, looking back at the spot where the light had been. The road was clean and dry, with no footprints or marks. The trees looked untouched, as if nothing had happened. Mark tried the ignition again, and the Jeep roared back to life. We climbed in, still processing the inexplicable event that had just occurred. It started the summer I turned 17. We lived in a farmhouse about 20 minutes outside Lincoln, Nebraska. Not the middle of nowhere, but close. Our back property bordered this big cornfield that belonged to the Brenners, who leased out their land every season. Real tall, thick stuff. You couldn't see more than a foot in once it hit full height. No trails, no gaps, just this wall of green that started maybe 20 feet behind our yard. The first time I heard it, it was around 1000 p.m. I was out on the back steps messing with my phone, just killing time before bed. It was quiet, no wind, no cars on the road. You get used to that kind of stillness living out here. Then I heard it. Caleb, my name, not shouted, more like spoken clearly from a distance. I froze. It came from the field, like maybe 15 feet in, just past the first couple rows. It didn't sound panicked or anything, just normal. The weird part, it was my voice. Not kind of like me, not similar. It was me. The tone, the rhythm, even the way I say my name, a little flat, like I don't care much. I stood up and looked, but it was dark and the porch light only went so far. The corn just stood there. Nothing moved. I waited a bit. Nothing else. Then I went inside and told myself it was some weird echo thing, or maybe just my imagination. Went to bed. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same voice. Caleb. This time it was quieter. Not like it was farther, like something was different. Later, we found ourselves driving through a strange night. The lights vanished like someone switched off a lamp. The radio static came back and the usual dawn birds started calling. We looked at each other, still processing. Driving back, none of us said much. The forest was waking up around us. Birds chirping, leaves rustling with the morning breeze. When we got to town, the clocks on the dashboard, our phones, even the gas station clock all read 4:17. None of our watches moved forward for hours. We compared notes later, trying to piece it together. None of us could explain how we'd lost time, or how the deer disappeared, read, or what those lights really were, but it all centered on that frozen moment on the road. Something paused, something watched, and somehow we ended up exactly where we started. I still think about it when I'm driving late, and I wonder if that's just how time works sometimes, or if something else was there in the woods that night just waiting. But none of us ever saw that deer again. The strange voice started appearing at night, always calling out my name, Caleb. At first, I tried to ignore it, dismissing the sound echoing from the darkness outside. I'd respond hesitantly, feeling ridiculous talking into empty space, then quickly retreat inside and lock the door without waking my parents. Days passed, and the occurrences became a routine. Not every night, but frequent enough that I began anticipating it. I started recording on my phone, hoping to capture evidence, but each attempt yielded nothing. The recordings remained silent, even when I clearly heard the whisper. My nights became increasingly tense. I'd fake sleep early to avoid suspicion, but my ears remained alert, straining to hear that single word drifting from the cornfield or floating near the yard's edge. Always just Caleb. Eventually, I confided in my friend Marcus. He was skeptical but intrigued enough to join me one night. We sat on the back steps, making casual conversation to pass the time. Suddenly it happened. The voice came again. Marcus was startled, convinced it was my voice. I confirmed it wasn't me. Curiosity overtook caution. Marcus suggested we investigate. Against my protests, he walked into the cornfield, flashlight cutting a narrow path through the stalks. I heard him move, then stop. Then he said Caleb in a flat, emotionless tone. Immediately after, something started moving toward me through the corn. Panicked, I rushed into the field, calling Marcus's name. I found him crouched on the ground, breathing heavily, the flashlight discarded nearby. He looked up and said something chilling. It copied me. We both knew something unexplainable had just happened. The morning after Marcus left, I woke up early and looked out at the field. Something was off. Footprints marked the dirt. Some were mine and Marcus's, but another trail caught my eye. These prints were different. Bare feet, longer strides, deeper impressions that seemed heavier than they should be. Strangest of all, the path just ended, as if it continued, but left no return trail. When I showed my dad, he brushed it off. Probably just kids messing around, he said, clearly uncomfortable. He didn't want me investigating and told me to leave it alone. That night, I stayed inside, locking the back door and keeping the lights off. Around 10:15, everything changed. The voice returned, louder this time, seeming to come from right outside my window. I crept across the floor and peeked through the blinds. Nothing was there, just moonlight, grass, and the silent cornfield. I stayed awake, listening. By morning, more prints had appeared, circling the back of the house and stopping directly beneath my window. Sleep became impossible. My mom, thinking I was stressed about school, started making me sleepy time tea. I'd pour it out, pretending to drink. The voice continued that Friday, repeating, "Caleb," with the same exact tone. Then something new. "Come see." That was the breaking point. I told my parents everything. They looked worried, but tried to convince me it was just stress, maybe a dream I was misremembering. My dad walked the cornfield's edge with his hunting rifle, returning after 15 minutes claiming everything was clear. When I asked about the footprints, he didn't respond. The next few nights were silent, but I felt watched. I closed all curtains, blocked doors, and tried sleeping during the day. Then at 3 a.m. one night, everything changed again. A soft white light led my room, like a misty spotlight. No sound, just an intense pressure, as if the air had suddenly thickened. The cornfield was silver in the moonlight. Figures stood unnaturally at the edge of the first row, tall, thin, with heads that sloped backward. No eyes, just smooth ovals. I shut the curtain and backed away. By morning, dozens of bare footprints circled the house in long strides. I asked my dad about anything strange. He mentioned the trail cam on the shed had been knocked over, claiming a raccoon might be responsible. When I requested to see the footage, he simply said the memory card was wiped clean. Something felt wrong. I started keeping a knife under my pillow. Not for protection, really, just to feel less powerless. Going outside became impossible. 2 weeks ago, the incident repeated. I was in bed with headphones on, pretending to sleep. Around 10:30, I felt a shift on the floorboards, a creak. Pulling off my headphones, I heard a voice calling my name, Caleb, from the hallway. I grabbed the knife and cracked the door. Darkness. Nothing. The voice came again, this time from downstairs. "Caleb, come see." Lights flickered once, then stabilized. I waited an hour before leaving my room. Everything seemed normal. Doors were locked, but the sliding glass door in the dining room stood open an inch. Outside, only one set of footprints remained. Mine. I apologize, but the text you've provided appears to be incomplete or fragmented. Could you please share the full text that you would like me to rewrite? Without the complete original text, I cannot accurately restructure the paragraphs while maintaining the original meaning.